She
We have
stumbled
to
through the
leave.
barn door
Now.
at dawn
I
wearing a
can't.
blood-stained
I'm
wedding
scared.
dress, and the
They're
animals
coming.
that were
Take
supposed
my
to be
hand.
dead
All right.
lifted their heads when she touched them. The man holding the rifle didn't know whether to shoot her or beg her to stay, but by sunrise, his decision would change everything. If you want to see how a woman everyone called cursed became the most dangerous thing the frontier ever tried to break, stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's begin. The wedding dress had been white once. Now it dragged through the dirt like something pulled from a grave, the hem black with mud and torn where Clara Whitmore had stumbled through sage and stone for 3 miles in the dark. The bodice, hand-stitched by her aunt over 2 months of careful work, hung loose at the shoulders where she'd clawed at the buttons trying to breathe after Jonathan Hayes left her standing alone at the church door. Clara didn't remember leaving town. She remembered the murmuring voices behind her, the pitying stares that felt sharper than knives. Someone had laughed. She couldn't recall who, but the sound had burned itself into her skull like a brand. So she'd walked, away from the church, away from the boarding house where she'd been living on borrowed grace, away from everything familiar until her feet bled through her ruined satin shoes and the night swallowed her whole. The barn appeared just as the first hint of gray touched the horizon. Clara almost missed it, a dark shape hunched against the hills like something trying to hide. She didn't care what it was. Shelter meant survival. That was all that mattered now. The door hung crooked on leather hinges. Clara slipped inside and pulled it shut behind her, leaning against the rough wood while her heart hammered against her ribs. The smell hit her immediately. Sickness. Not the sharp tang of manure or hay gone moldy, but something deeper, something wrong. Clara had grown up around animals. Her mother had kept chickens and goats behind their house in St. Louis before the fever took her, and she knew the scent of death creeping into living things. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness. Stalls lined both walls. In the dim pre-dawn light filtering through gaps in the boards, Clara could make out shapes moving weakly in the shadows. A horse nickered softly. The sound was wrong, breathy and thin, like something drowning. Clara's mother used to say she had a gift. Not magic, nothing superstitious or sinful, just a sense for what ailed creatures that couldn't speak for themselves. Her mother would press her palm to a goat's flank and close her eyes, and somehow she'd know. Twisted gut, bad feed, poison in the water. She'd taught Clara the same strange attentiveness, though Clara had never fully understood how it worked. She only knew that sometimes, when she touched an animal, she could feel what was wrong. The nearest stall held a mare, dark coat slick with sweat despite the cool morning. Clara approached slowly, making the soft clicking sound her mother had taught her. The horse's head lolled toward her, ears flat. "Easy," Clara whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you." She reached through the slats and rested her hand on the mare's neck. The horse flinched but didn't pull away. Fever. Clara felt it immediately, a wrongness radiating from deep in the animal's belly. Not colic, not founder, something toxic moving through the mare's system like slow poison. Without thinking, Clara unlatched the stall door and stepped inside. The mare's legs trembled. White foam crusted at the corners of her mouth. "What did they feed you?" Clara murmured, running her hands along the horse's flank, over her distended belly. "What got into you?" The mare's breathing evened slightly under her touch. Clara kept her palms steady, fingers tracing the hard ridge of the animal's spine. She closed her eyes and let herself feel. There, in the gut, something sharp and chemical, burning through tissue it shouldn't touch. Clara's eyes snapped open. "Water," she whispered. "It's in the water." A rifle cocked behind her. Clara spun, heart lurching into her throat. A man stood in the barn doorway, silhouetted against the growing dawn. Tall, broad-shouldered, the rifle pointed directly at her chest. "Give me one reason," he said, voice low and rough as gravel, "why I shouldn't assume you're here to finish stealing what your kind already took." Clara's hands shot up. The mare shifted behind her, blowing air through her nostrils. I didn't take anything. I was just trespassing in my barn at dawn wearing a wedding dress." The man stepped forward. Clara could see him better now. Dark hair, older than her by maybe 10 years, face carved into hard lines by sun and work. His eyes were the color of creekstone, and they held no warmth whatsoever. "Try again." "I needed shelter." Clara's voice came out steadier than she expected. That's all. I'll leave. I'm sorry. You'll leave when I say you can leave. He didn't lower the rifle. Who sent you? Nobody sent me. I don't even know where I am. The man's jaw tightened. You expect me to believe you just wandered onto my land in a wedding dress by accident? I expect you to shoot me or let me go, Clara said, but I don't expect you to believe anything. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. He studied her for a long moment, gaze moving from her ruined dress to her bleeding feet to the mare standing calm behind her. That horse was dying yesterday, he said slowly. Wouldn't let anyone near her. Clara glanced back at the mare. The animal's breathing had steadied even more. Still sick, but no longer thrashing. She's poisoned, Clara said. They all are, aren't they? The whole herd. The rifle lowered an inch. What did you say? It's in the water. Something chemical. Probably runoff from somewhere upstream. It's burning through their systems. Clara turned back to the mare, keeping her movement slow. How long have they been sick? 2 weeks. The man's voice had changed, still wary, but with an edge of desperation underneath. Lost 3 already. Vet said there was nothing to be done. Your vet's an idiot. Clara ran her hand along the mare's neck again. The horse leaned into her touch. They need clean water, fresh hay, and something to bind the toxins before they tear through what's left of the tissue. The man stared at her. How do you know that? My mother taught me. Clara met his eyes. Before she died. Silence stretched between them. Dawn light crept further into the barn, illuminating dust motes hanging in the air. Somewhere outside, a rooster crowed. The man finally lowered the rifle completely. Cade Holloway, he said. This is my ranch. Clara Whitmore. She paused. Or it was. I don't know what my name is anymore. Cade's eyes dropped to her ring finger. No band, no mark where one had been. What happened to you? He asked. Clara's throat tightened. I made a mistake, and everyone I knew made sure I paid for it. She expected mockery, pity. Instead, Cade just nodded once, like he understood something she hadn't said out loud. Can you really help them? He gestured at the stalls around them. The animals. Clara looked at the mare, then at the other horses visible in the dim light, all showing the same symptoms, all dying slowly while no one knew how to save them. Maybe, she said. If you let me try. Cade was quiet for a long time. Clara could see him weighing options, calculating risks. She was a stranger, a woman alone, someone clearly running from something. But his animals were dying. You can stay in the spare room in the main house, he said finally. Work for room and board. If you can save even one more horse, it's worth the risk. Clara's chest constricted. She'd expected to be thrown off the property, arrested maybe. Why would you trust me? She whispered. Cade's expression didn't change. I don't. But that mare hasn't let anyone touch her in 3 days, and she's standing calm as Sunday morning with your hand on her neck. So either you're a witch, or you know something nobody else does. Either way, I'm desperate enough not to care which. He turned toward the door, then paused. Get yourself cleaned up. There's a pump around back. I'll bring you something that isn't a torn wedding dress to wear. Mr. Holloway. Cade? He interrupted. Just Cade. Clara nodded slowly. Thank you. He didn't answer, just walked out of the barn, leaving her standing alone with the dying horses and the first fragile thread of hope she'd felt since Jonathan Hayes had shattered her life. The sun rose fully while Clara washed at the pump behind the barn. The water was ice cold, but she scrubbed at her arms and face until her skin stung. The wedding dress would have to be burned. Even if she could clean it, she never wanted to see it again. Cade returned carrying a bundle of clothes, men's work trousers, a faded cotton shirt, and a leather belt. These were my wife's, he said without preamble. She was about your size. Clara took them carefully. Your wife? Dead 4 years. His tone left no room for questions. Get dressed, then I'll show you the rest of the herd. She changed behind the barn, fingers clumsy on the unfamiliar buttons. The clothes smelled like cedar and dust. They fit well enough. When she emerged, Cade was waiting with 2 horses saddled. He handed her the reins to a gentle-looking bay gelding. You ride? Not well. You'll learn. He swung onto his own mount with practiced ease. We've got 200 head scattered across the north pasture. Half of them are showing symptoms. Clara climbed onto the bay, gripping the saddle horn tighter than she wanted to admit. The horse shifted beneath her but didn't bolt. They rode out across land that seemed to stretch forever under the pale morning sky. The ranch sprawled across rolling hills dotted with sage and scrub oak. In the distance, mountains rose like broken teeth against the horizon. "How much land?" Clara asked. 8,000 acres. Cade's voice carried a thread of pride beneath the exhaustion. "Bought it with my wife 10 years ago. Built everything from nothing." Clara could see the evidence of that work everywhere. Fences stretching into the distance, a windmill turning slowly on a far ridge, irrigation ditches carved into the hillsides. This was a place someone had fought to build. "What happened to her?" The question slipped out before Clara could stop it. "Your wife." Cade's jaw tightened. "Pneumonia. Took her in 3 days." He didn't look at Clara. "I wasn't here. I was in town buying supplies. By the time I got back, she was already gone." The pain in his voice was old, but not healed. Clara recognized it. She'd heard the same tone in her own voice when she spoke about her mother. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Cade just nodded. They rode in silence until they crested a hill and Clara saw the herd below. Cattle moved slowly across the grassland, but even from a distance she could see something was wrong. Too many lying down. Too much lethargy in the way they moved. "There," Cade said, pointing to a creek cutting through the valley. "That's the water source for this section. If you're right about contamination, it's coming from upstream." Clara studied the creek's path. It wound down from the northern hills, disappearing into a narrow canyon. "What's up there?" she asked. "Old mining operation. Abandoned 10 years ago." Cade's expression darkened. "Or supposed to be abandoned." Clara urged her horse forward, picking her way down the slope. The cattle barely reacted as she approached. Another bad sign. Healthy animals would have moved away from an unfamiliar rider. She dismounted near the closest cow, a big red heifer lying on her side. The animal's breathing was labored, sides heaving. Clara knelt and placed her palm on the cow's flank. The fever was there, same as the mare. Same toxic burn working through the digestive system. "It's the same," she said. "All of them drinking from poisoned water." Cade swung down from his horse. "Can you fix it?" "Not fix, but I can maybe keep them alive long enough for their bodies to fight it off." Clara stood, brushing dirt from her borrowed trousers. "We need to cut them off from this water source. Drive them to clean water, and we need to do it fast. That's 2 days of hard riding to move a herd this size." Cade looked at the sky, calculating. "And I'm down 3 hands because they left for better pay 2 weeks ago." "How many workers do you have left?" 4, plus me." He met her eyes. "Plus you, if you're willing." Clara had never driven cattle in her life. She'd never done ranch work of any kind. But she'd also never had anywhere else to go. "Tell me what to do," she said. "Tights." The ranch hand stared at Clara like she'd crawled out of hell. There were 4 of them, gathered in front of the bunkhouse, when Cade rode up with Clara behind him. 2 were young, barely 20, with sunburned faces and suspicious eyes. The third was older, Mexican, with gray threading through his dark hair. The 4th was a woman, rail-thin and hard-faced, wearing men's clothes and a gun on her hip. Cade dismounted. "This is Clara Whitmore. She's going to help us save the herd." The silence was deafening. Finally, the older man spoke. "Boss, with respect, we don't need another mouth to feed. We need experienced hands." "She knows what's poisoning the cattle, Miguel." Cade's tone left no room for argument. "Which is more than the vet figured out." The woman snorted. "She a veterinarian?" "No, Iris." Cade's patience was clearly fraying. "But she's what we've got." Miguel's eyes moved over Clara, taking in the borrowed clothes, the bare feet still bloody from her walk through the wilderness. "Where'd she come from?" "That's not your concern." Cade's voice dropped into something dangerous. "What is your concern is getting those cattle moved to the south pasture before we lose the whole herd. Clara says it's the water. We're cutting them off from the creek and driving them to clean grazing." One of the younger hands, blonde, with a weak chin, shook his head. "That's 2 days of work. We can't—" "Then we work 2 days," Cade interrupted. "Or we watch 200 head die slowly. Your choice." Nobody argued after that. But Clara could feel their resentment like a physical weight as Cade divided up assignments. Miguel and Iris would take the north flank. The two younger hands, called Jesse and Tom, would cover the south. Cade would lead from the front, and Clara would ride drag, pushing stragglers from behind. "You know what drag means?" Iris asked, eyeing Clara with open skepticism. "I can guess." "It means eating everyone else's dust and getting kicked by every stubborn cow that decides she doesn't want to move." Iris's smile was sharp. "Think you can handle that in your delicate condition?" Clara met her stare without flinching. "I'll manage." Iris's smile faded. She turned and walked toward the corral without another word. Miguel lingered. "You really know what's wrong with them?" he asked quietly. Clara nodded. "Toxins in the water, something chemical leaching from the old mine." Miguel's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "My father worked those mines," he said, "before they closed. He died coughing blood 5 years later." "I'm sorry." "If you're right about the water, you might save this herd." Miguel tilted his head slightly. "But don't expect gratitude. People around here don't trust easy." "I noticed." Miguel almost smiled. "Get yourself some boots. You'll need them." Besides. Clara found boots in the tack room, worn leather that had belonged to Cade's wife. They were slightly too big, but she stuffed the toes with cloth until they fit well enough. By the time she returned to the corral, the others were already saddling horses. Cade handed her the reins to the bay gelding again. "His name's Copper," Cade said. "He's steady. Won't throw you unless you do something stupid." Clara stroked the horse's neck. "What counts as stupid?" "You'll know when it happens." Cade swung onto his own mount, a big buckskin stallion that danced sideways, eager to move. "Stay behind the herd. Push them forward, but don't crowd them. If one breaks off, circle around and bring her back. Don't get between a cow and her calf." Clara's stomach twisted. "That's a lot of rules." "You'll figure it out." Cade looked at her for a moment, something unreadable in his expression. "Or you'll get trampled. Either way, we're burning daylight." They rode out at full dawn, spreading across the pasture in a loose line. Clara took her position at the rear, heart hammering. Miguel whistled sharply. The sound cut across the valley like a whip crack. The cattle began to move. It was chaos from the first moment. The herd didn't flow like a river the way Clara had imagined. They bunched and scattered, cows breaking off to circle back toward the creek, calves bawling for mothers, bulls squaring up to challenge the riders. Clara quickly learned that eating dust wasn't a metaphor. The air turned thick with it as hundreds of hooves churned the dry ground. She pulled her bandana over her nose and mouth, eyes watering. A heifer broke from the herd, trotting determinedly back toward the contaminated water. Clara urged Copper forward, circling wide the way Cade had instructed. The heifer changed direction but didn't rejoin the group, just stood there, stubborn and feverish, sides heaving. Clara dismounted. The heifer's eyes rolled white. "Easy," Clara murmured, approaching slowly. "I know you feel awful. I know the water sounds good, but it's killing you." She reached out carefully and pressed her palm to the heifer's neck. The animal flinched but didn't bolt. Clara closed her eyes and felt. Fever, toxins burning through the gut. But underneath, something still fighting. This one could survive if they got her to clean water fast enough. "Come on," Clara whispered. "Let's go." She walked back toward Copper, and after a moment, the heifer followed. Clara mounted and guided both animals back to the herd, feeling a small flicker of triumph. Iris rode past, expression hard. "Don't celebrate yet. We've got 200 more just as stubborn." Thahik. By noon, Clara's entire body ached. Her thighs burned from gripping the saddle. Her hands were blistered from the reins. Dust coated her throat, making every breath taste like dirt. But the herd was moving, slowly, painfully, but moving. Cade rode up and down the line, checking positions, shouting encouragement. Clara watched him work. Efficient, tireless, never asking anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. He'd built this ranch from nothing. She could see that in every movement, every decision. Late afternoon brought new problems. The herd reached a dry riverbed cutting across their path. Most of the cattle crossed without issue, but several sick cows balked at the drop, too weak to make the jump. Clara dismounted and approached the nearest cow. She was older, ribs showing through her hide, breathing wet and labored. "She's dying," Jessie said, riding up beside Clara. "Best to leave her." Clara shook her head. Not yet. She pressed both hands to the cow's side, feeling the familiar wrongness spreading through the animal's body. Worse than the others. The poison had been working longer here, but the cow's heart still beat strong. She was a fighter. Clara began humming, low and rhythmic, the same melody her mother used to sing when a goat was struggling through a hard birth. She didn't know why it worked, only that sometimes when animals were scared or hurting, the sound calmed them. The cow's breathing evened. Her muscles relaxed slightly. Clara kept humming and gently guided the animal toward the riverbed edge. 1 step, 2. The cow resisted, but Clara stayed patient, hands steady. Finally, the cow jumped. She landed hard but didn't fall. Clara crossed behind her and urged her forward to rejoin the herd. When she looked up, all 4 ranch hands were staring at her. "What the hell was that?" Tom asked, voice pitched high with shock. Clara shrugged, throat too dry to explain. Miguel was the first to look away. "Keep moving," he said gruffly. "We're losing light." But Clara caught the way he watched her after that, wary but no longer dismissive, like maybe she was something other than dead weight. They made camp as the sun touched the western hills. The herd settled into uneasy rest in a natural box canyon that would hold them through the night. The riders built a fire and broke out hardtack and jerky. Clara sat apart from the others, too exhausted to eat. Her hands shook when she tried to open her canteen. Kate appeared beside her holding a tin cup. "Coffee," he said. "It's terrible, but it's hot." Clara took it gratefully. The coffee tasted like it had been boiled over old nails, but the warmth helped. "You did good today," Kate said. "I barely kept up." "You kept up? That's more than I expected." He settled onto the ground beside her, stretching his long legs toward the fire. "That thing you did with the cow at the riverbed. The humming." Clara tensed. "My mother taught me. I know it sounds—" "It worked," Kate interrupted. "That's all I care about." Clara studied his profile in the firelight. Hard features, but not cruel. Tired eyes that had seen too much loss. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly. "Letting me stay." Cade was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "When my wife died, people told me to sell the ranch. Move on. Said there was nothing left here worth fighting for." He looked at Clara. "But she built this place with me. Every fence post, every corral. I couldn't let it die just because she did." Clara understood. "So you're holding on?" "Every day." Cade's jaw tightened. "And every day something tries to take it from me. Drought, rustlers, sickness, rich ranchers wanting to expand." He gestured at the herd. "These cattle are all I've got left. If they die, the ranch dies. And if the ranch dies—" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. "I won't let them die," Clara said. The words came out stronger than she intended. "I'll do whatever it takes." Cade looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once and stood. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be worse." The next day was worse. The heat rose early and stayed brutal. The cattle moved slower, weakened by sickness and stress. 2 calves collapsed and had to be carried on horseback. 1 cow died in the middle of the trail, just dropped and didn't get up again. Clara felt it like a personal failure. "You can't save them all," Miguel said when he saw her face. "Some are too far gone." But Clara couldn't accept that. She pushed herself harder, rode longer, refused to rest even when Kate ordered her to take a break. By mid-afternoon, she was swaying in the saddle. Iris rode up beside her. "You're going to fall and get trampled," she said flatly. "Drink some water before you pass out." Clara reached for her canteen and realized it was empty. She couldn't remember the last time she'd taken a drink. Iris swore and handed over her own canteen. "You're either the toughest woman I've ever met or the dumbest. Haven't decided which." Clara drank deeply. "Can it be both?" Iris almost smiled. "Yeah, probably." They reached clean water just before sunset. The herd smelled it and surged forward, desperate. Clara had to fight to keep them from trampling each other in their rush to drink. When the cattle finally settled, spread across good grazing land with a clear stream running through it, Clara dismounted and nearly collapsed. Cade caught her arm. "Easy." "I'm fine." "You're dead on your feet." He guided her toward the fire Miguel was building. "Sit, eat. That's an order." Clara sank down gratefully. Her vision swam. Tom appeared with a plate of beans and bacon. "You actually did it," he said, voice surprised. We didn't lose more than a dozen. 12's too many, Clara said. 12 out of 200 is a miracle, Miguel corrected. He crouched beside the fire, studying her with new respect. The boss made the right call bringing you in. Clara looked across the fire at Cade. He was talking to Iris, pointing at something in the distance. But he must have felt her gaze because he glanced over and met her eyes. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Or the beginning of trust. Clara looked away first, heart doing something complicated in her chest. Get some sleep, Miguel said. Tomorrow, we start figuring out how to keep them healthy. They stayed with the herd for 3 more days while Clara taught the ranch hands how to identify the sickest animals and dose them with a mixture she made from charcoal and clay, something her mother had used to bind toxins in poisoned goats. It was crude medicine, half guesswork. But it worked. The cattle began to improve. Fevers dropped. Breathing eased. By the end of the week, even the weakest cows were back on their feet. Cade sent Jesse and Tom back to the main ranch to handle the other livestock. Miguel and Iris stayed with the herd, while Cade and Clara rode up into the northern hills to find the source of the contamination. They found it 2 miles upstream from where the cattle had been drinking. The old mine entrance gaped like a wound in the hillside, timbers rotted and collapsing. Water seeped from the opening, carrying a greenish tint that made Clara's stomach turn. Copper runoff, Cade said grimly, leaching from the old shafts. Can it be stopped? Not without money I don't have. Cade dismounted and walked closer, studying the water flow. I'll need to fence off this whole section, reroute the herd permanently. Clara could see the calculation in his eyes, the cost in materials, labor, time. Everything this ranch didn't have to spare. I'll help, she said. Cade looked at her. You've already helped. More than you know. I'm not done yet. Clara slid off Copper and walked to stand beside Cade at the mine entrance. You gave me a place when I had nothing. Let me earn it. Cade's expression softened slightly. You're not what I expected when I found you in my barn. What did you expect? Someone broken. He studied her face. But you're not broken, just bent. Clara's throat tightened. Maybe. Or maybe I just haven't realized it yet. Cade reached out and gripped her shoulder briefly. We'll figure it out, together. They rode back to camp as the sun set, painting the hills gold and red. Clara felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. But that night, as she lay in her bedroll under the stars, listening to the cattle settle and the ranch hands' quiet conversation around the fire, she heard Iris say something that made her blood run cold. You hear Eleanor Voss is back in town? Miguel's response was too quiet to catch, but Cade's voice carried clear across the camp. I don't care what Eleanor does. She's not my concern anymore. She's making you her concern, Iris said. Word is she's been asking questions. About the ranch. About some woman you hired. Silence. Clara's heart kicked hard against her ribs. Let her ask, Cade said finally. It's none of her business. But Clara heard the tension in his voice, and she understood, with the cold certainty of someone who'd already lost everything once, that trouble was coming. She just didn't know how bad it would be. Eleanor Voss arrived at the ranch 3 days later in a carriage that cost more than most men earned in a year. Clara was mucking out stalls when she heard the commotion, horses whinnying, Tom's voice raised in greeting, the creak of expensive wheels on the dirt road leading to the main house. She straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, and walked to the barn door. The woman who stepped down from the carriage looked like she'd been carved from porcelain and dressed by someone who'd never seen honest dirt. Her traveling dress was deep emerald silk, fitted perfectly to a tiny waist. Her hat perched at an angle that had to be deliberate, decorated with feathers Clara couldn't name. Everything about her screamed money and breeding and a life lived far from places where animals died and work destroyed your hands. Cade emerged from the house, and Clara saw his whole body go rigid. Eleanor. Cade. The woman's voice was smooth as cream, with an accent that marked her as Eastern educated. You look well. Frontier life agrees with you. What are you doing here? Eleanor's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in her eyes. Is that any way to greet an old friend? I've come all the way from Boston to see how you're managing. I'm managing fine. Yes, I can see that. Eleanor's gaze swept across the ranch yard, taking in the worn fences, the patched barn roof, the chickens scratching in the dirt. Her expression said everything her words didn't. Though I imagine it's been difficult, running a place this size alone. I'm not alone. Cade's tone could have cut glass. I have good people working here. Of course. Eleanor's eyes landed on Clara, still standing in the barn doorway covered in horse manure and hay. Is that one of them? Clara felt the assessment like a slap. She knew exactly what Eleanor saw. A woman in men's clothes, hair escaping from a messy braid, hands calloused and dirty. Nothing refined or proper about her. Cade's jaw tightened. That's Clara Whitmore. She's the reason I still have a herd. How industrious. Eleanor's smile sharpened. You always did have a talent for finding strays, Cade. Clara's temper flared, but before she could respond, Miguel appeared at her elbow. Boss needs us to check the south fence line, he said quietly. Storm damage. It was a lie. There'd been no storm, but Clara recognized an exit when she heard one. Of course, she said, forcing her voice steady. She walked past Eleanor without another glance, feeling the woman's eyes boring into her back. Miguel waited until they were out of earshot before speaking. That's trouble. I gathered. She and the boss were engaged once, 5 years back, before he married Rachel. Miguel's expression was carefully neutral. Eleanor went east for finishing school, told Cade she'd be back in a year. She stayed gone 3. By the time she returned, Cade had already married. Clara's stomach dropped. She wanted him back. Still does, from the look of it. Miguel glanced back toward the house, where Eleanor and Cade still stood talking. Eleanor's father owns half the territory. Banking, railroads, mining. She's used to getting what she wants. What does she want with Cade's ranch? It's barely profitable. Miguel's look was shrewd. Maybe it ain't about the ranch. Clara felt something twist in her chest. She'd been at the ranch less than 2 weeks. She had no claim on Cade Holloway, no right to feel anything about who visited him or why. But she felt it anyway. They worked the fence line until sunset, replacing posts that didn't need replacing, tightening wire that was already tight. When they finally returned to the main house, Eleanor's carriage was gone. Cade sat alone on the porch, a bottle of whiskey on the step beside him. He wasn't drinking, just staring out at the darkening hills. Clara hesitated, then climbed the porch steps. She gone? For now. Cade's voice was flat. She's staying at the hotel in town. Says she's here to oversee some business interests for her father. Is that true? Probably. Eleanor doesn't do anything without multiple reasons. He finally looked at Clara. I'm sorry about what she said, calling you a stray. Clara sat down on the step below him. I've been called worse. Recently. Cade was quiet for a moment. You never told me what happened. Before you showed up here. Clara pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. The night air was cooling fast, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. His name was Jonathan Hayes, she said finally. He came through St. Louis selling mining investments. Said he was from a good family in Denver. Said he'd made his fortune in silver and was looking to settle down. Cade didn't interrupt. He courted me for 3 months, proper and respectful. Met my aunt, went to church, did everything right. Clara's voice went hollow. I thought he was decent, honest. When he proposed, my aunt cried she was so happy. What happened? Wedding day, I gave him access to my aunt's savings. For the house he said we'd buy together, for our future. Clara laughed bitterly. He took it all, $1,500, everything my aunt had saved in 30 years. Then he disappeared before the ceremony even started. Cade swore under his breath. The town blamed me, Clara continued. Said I should have known better, that a woman my age, 24 and unmarried, should have been suspicious when a man like that showed interest. They called me desperate, stupid. Some said I was probably in on it. That's insane. That's what people do when they need someone to blame. Clara rested her chin on her knees. My aunt wouldn't speak to me. Said I'd ruined her. The boarding house threw me out. I had nowhere to go and no money to get there anyway. So I walked until I found your barn. Cade was quiet for a long time. Then he reached down and gripped her shoulder briefly, the same gesture he'd made at the mine. You're not stupid, he said, and you're sure as hell not desperate. You survived something that would have broken most people. That takes strength. Claire's throat tightened. Some days I don't feel very strong. Strong people rarely do. Cade stood, picking up the whiskey bottle. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start rebuilding the north fence. It's going to be brutal work. Clara watched him disappear into the house. Then she sat alone on the porch for a while longer, listening to the night sounds and trying to ignore the feeling that Eleanor Voss's arrival had changed something fundamental. The next morning proved Cade wasn't exaggerating about the fence work. They rode out at dawn with 2 pack horses loaded with wire, posts, and tools. The section they needed to repair stretched for nearly 3 miles across rocky terrain that fought them every step. Clara learned quickly that building fence was an art form involving physics, profanity, and sheer stubborn will. The posts had to be sunk deep in ground that seemed determined to reject them. The wire had to be strung tight enough to hold cattle, but not so tight it would snap in the wind. And every few hundred yards, the landscape threw new obstacles, boulders, gullies, slopes that made standing upright a challenge. By midday, Clara's hands were bleeding through her gloves. Her shoulders screamed. Sweat soaked through her shirt despite the cool autumn air. Cade worked beside her without complaint, setting posts with a rhythm born from years of practice. Miguel and Jesse handled the wire, while Tom rode ahead, marking where the next post should go. "You're doing good," Cade said when they stopped to water the horses. He nodded at the section they'd completed. "Most people quit by now." Clara flexed her aching fingers. "I'm too tired to quit." "That's the secret. Stay too tired to know better." He handed her his canteen. "Drink. We've got another mile before dark." They worked until the sun touched the western mountains, then made camp in a shallow draw protected from the wind. Jesse built a fire while Miguel broke out supplies for dinner. Clara collapsed against her saddle and closed her eyes, too exhausted to move. She must have dozed off because when she opened her eyes again, full dark had fallen and someone had draped a blanket over her. The fire crackled nearby. Low voices murmured in conversation. Clara sat up slowly, her whole body protested. Cade appeared with a tin plate. "Eat. You'll feel worse tomorrow if you don't." The food was simple: beans, bacon, hardtack, but Clara was hungry enough not to care. She ate mechanically while Cade settled beside her. "You'll toughen up," he said. "First few weeks are the hardest." "How long did it take you to adjust to this life?" Cade considered the question. "I grew up on a farm in Missouri. Manual labor wasn't new, but the scale out here, the isolation, the constant fight against the land trying to kill you, that took time." He stared into the fire. "Rachel adapted faster than I did, honestly. She grew up in Philadelphia, never touched a cow before we moved west. But she learned everything: riding, roping, branding, worked harder than any hand I ever hired." Clara heard the pain beneath his words. "You miss her." "Every day." Cade's voice went rough. "But the missing gets quieter over time, like an old injury that aches when the weather changes but doesn't stop you from working." Eleanor didn't wait. "No." Cade's expression hardened. She decided finishing school was more important than coming back. By the time she changed her mind, I'd already met Rachel. Eleanor never forgave me for that. "Is that why she's here now?" Cade looked at Clara, firelight casting shadows across his face. "Eleanor's here because she thinks she can still get what she wants. She always does, eventually. Her father makes sure of it." "What does she want?" "This ranch." "Me?" "Both, probably." Cade's jaw tightened. "Her father's been trying to buy me out for 3 years. Says this land would be better used for railroad expansion or some damn thing. I keep refusing, so now Eleanor shows up with her smiles and her pretty dresses, thinking she can convince me where money failed." Clara felt anger burn through her exhaustion. "She thinks you're that easy to manipulate?" "She thinks every man is." Cade stood, brushing dirt from his pants. "But I didn't build this place to hand it over to someone who sees it as a business investment. This land means something. It costs something, and I'm not giving it up." The fierceness in his voice made Clara's chest tighten. She understood that feeling, the desperate need to hold on to something when the world kept trying to rip it away. They worked the fence line for 3 more days. By the end, Clara's hands had calloused over the blisters. Her muscles stopped screaming and settled into a constant ache she could work through. She learned to read the land, to spot good post sites, to judge wire tension by feel. And she learned to work beside Cade with an easy rhythm that felt natural, like they'd been doing this together for years instead of weeks. On the 4th day, they rode back to find Iris waiting with the news. "Town's talking," she'd said without preamble. "About you." About Clara. Cade's expression went dark. What are they saying? That you hired some woman nobody knows to work the ranch, that she's living in the main house. Iris's tone was carefully neutral, but her eyes flicked to Clara. Some are saying it ain't proper. Others are saying worse. Clara's stomach sank. She should have expected this. A ruined woman living alone with a widower. Of course people would talk. Let them talk, Cade said flatly. It ain't that simple, boss. Iris shifted her weight. Eleanor Voss has been visiting the church ladies, taking tea with the mayor's wife, asking questions about Clara's background, making concerned noises about propriety and Christian morals. Miguel swore in Spanish. Clara felt cold spread through her chest. She's trying to ruin my reputation. What reputation? Iris's voice wasn't cruel, just factual. No offense, but you showed up in a wedding dress with no explanation. Town already thinks you're trouble. Eleanor's just confirming what they want to believe anyway. That's enough, Cade said sharply. Clara's business is her own. Town can think whatever the hell they want. But Clara saw the calculation in his eyes. He was worried. A ranch owner's reputation mattered out here. Whispers about impropriety could cost him business, make it harder to hire good hands, damage relationships with suppliers. She was becoming a liability. I can leave, Clara said quietly. Find work somewhere else. You don't need this kind of trouble. You're not leaving. Cade's tone left no room for argument. I don't give a damn what Eleanor says or what the town thinks. You've earned your place here. Have I? Clara met his eyes. Or are you just being stubborn? Both. A ghost of a smile crossed Cade's face. I'm very good at stubborn. Despite everything, Clara almost laughed. But that night, lying in her small room off the kitchen, she heard voices drifting through the walls. Cade and Miguel, talking low in the main room. You know this won't end well, Miguel said. Eleanor's not going to stop, and the town will side with her. They always do. Then they side with her. Cade's voice was hard. I'm not throwing Clara out to satisfy gossip. It ain't about gossip, boss. It's about survival. You're already operating on thin margins. If Eleanor's father decides to make trouble, cut off your credit, pressure the feed suppliers, turn the other ranchers against you, this place goes under. Silence. I know, Cade said finally, and Clara heard the exhaustion in his voice. I know what's at stake, but I'm not abandoning someone who needs help just because it's inconvenient. I did that once. I won't do it again. Clara pressed her palm against the wall, throat tight. She didn't know what he meant by that last part, but she heard the weight of old guilt in his words. She also heard Miguel's resigned sigh. Your funeral, Miguel said. Just don't say I didn't warn you. Clara barely slept. When dawn came, she rose early and walked out to check on the horses, needing movement and fresh air to clear her head. The mare she'd first treated, the one who'd been dying that night, Clara stumbled into the barn, whickered softly when Clara approached. The horse was healthy now, coat gleaming, eyes bright. Clara had named her Ash for her gray coloring. Hey, girl, Clara murmured, stroking Ash's neck. You feeling good? The mare nuzzled her shoulder, warm breath against Clara's skin. Clara had always felt more comfortable with animals than people. Animals didn't lie, didn't pretend. They either trusted you or they didn't, and you knew where you stood. People were harder, messier. They smiled while planning your destruction, like Jonathan Hayes, like Eleanor Voss. Clara. She turned to find Cade standing in the barn doorway, backlit by the rising sun. We need to talk, he said. Clara's heart sank. This was it. The conversation where he'd explain very reasonably why she needed to leave, where he'd offer some money, maybe a letter of reference, and send her on her way to protect his ranch. She couldn't even blame him. But Cade's next words knocked that assumption sideways. I'm taking you to town today, introducing you properly, making it clear you work for me as a ranch hand, same as Miguel or Iris, and that anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. Clara stared at him. That's a terrible idea. Probably. It'll make everything worse. Maybe. Cade stepped into the barn, morning light cutting across his face. But I'm tired of Eleanor controlling the narrative. People want to gossip, fine, but they're going to hear the truth first. That you saved my herd when nobody else could. That you work harder than any hand I've had. That you're here because you earned it, not because of anything improper. Cade, die Spikam. Equal, I know what you're going to say. He held up a hand. That I'm risking the ranch, that it's not worth it. But here's the thing, Clara. This ranch was supposed to be about building something good, a place where hard work mattered more than gossip or status or who your father was. If I compromise that to keep Eleanor happy, then what's the point? I might as well sell to her father and be done with it. Clara's chest felt too tight. Nobody had ever stood up for her like this. Not her aunt, not the people in town who'd known her for years. Why? She whispered. Why does it matter so much? Cade was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with something Clara couldn't quite name. Because you remind me that some things are worth fighting for, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. He met her eyes. And because if I let Eleanor run you off, I'm no better than the people who abandoned you at that church. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back hard. Okay, she said. We'll go to town. Wear your Sunday best. A wry smile touched Cade's mouth. Or whatever passes for it around here, we're going to make an impression. Clara owned exactly 2 dresses, both borrowed from the trunk of Cade's dead wife's clothes. One was faded calico, practical and plain. The other was dark blue wool with a simple white collar, the kind a respectable woman might wear to church or a social call. She chose the blue dress, twisted her hair into the neatest braid she could manage, and scrubbed her hands until they looked almost presentable. When she emerged from her room, Cade was waiting by the wagon wearing clean clothes and an expression of grim determination. You look nice, he said. I look terrified. That too. Cade offered his hand to help her onto the wagon seat. But you don't have to be. I'll handle the talking. They drove into town in tense silence. Clara watched the landscape roll past, autumn grass turning gold, distant mountains sharp against the blue sky. A hawk circling overhead. Beautiful country. Harsh country. The kind of place that tested you constantly and didn't care if you passed or failed. The town itself was small. One main street lined with wooden buildings, a church at one end, a saloon at the other. People stopped to stare as Cade's wagon rolled past. Clara felt their eyes like brands. Cade pulled up in front of the general store and set the brake. First stop, he said. Then the feed supplier. Then the bank. By the time we're done, everyone will know exactly who you are and why you're here. And if they don't believe you, then they don't. Cade jumped down and came around to help her from the wagon. But at least we'll have said our piece. The general store was owned by a thin, nervous man named Howard Beckett, who nearly dropped his ledger when Cade walked in with Clara. Mr. Holloway, I wasn't expecting, that is, I heard you might be. Howard's eyes darted to Clara, then away. What can I do for you? Need to place an order, Howard. Also wanted to introduce you to Clara Whitmore. She's working my ranch now. Saved my entire herd from poisoning last month. Howard's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. Is that so? It is. Cade's tone was pleasant, but carried an edge. She's got a gift with animals. Best hand I've had in years. If she comes in here needing supplies, I want her treated with the same respect you'd show Miguel or any of my other workers. Of course, of course. Howard was sweating now. No disrespect intended, Mr. Holloway. None taken. Yet. Cade handed over a supply list. I'll need this ready by Friday. They left Howard stammering and moved on to the feed supplier, where Cade delivered the same speech. Then to the hardware store, the seamstress, the doctor's office. By noon, Clara's face hurt from holding a neutral expression while people stared and whispered. Their final stop was the bank. The First National Bank of Cedar Ridge was the nicest building in town, brick instead of wood, with actual glass windows and a sign painted in gold leaf. The banker, a portly man named Clarence Webb, greeted Cade with professional warmth that cooled noticeably when Clara entered behind him. Mr. Holloway, what brings you in today? Business, Clarence, and introductions. Cade gestured to Clara. This is Clara Whitmore, my new ranch foreman. She'll be handling some of the ranch accounts going forward. Clarence's expression went carefully blank. I see. That's highly unusual. Unusual but necessary. Clara has a head for figures and I trust her judgment. Cade leaned against the counter, casual but with steel underneath. Any reason that would be a problem? No problem at all. Clarence's smile didn't reach his eyes. Though I should mention, I had a visit from Miss Voss yesterday. She expressed some concern about the ranch's finances, suggested that perhaps you were being taken advantage of by certain unscrupulous individuals. Claire's hands clenched in her skirts. Cade's expression didn't change. Did she now? She was quite worried. Mentioned that vulnerable men are often targets for women of questionable character looking to secure their futures through deception. That's interesting, Cade said softly. Since the only person who's ever tried to deceive me regarding my ranch was Eleanor herself, when she tried to convince me last year that selling to her father was for my own good. Clarence flushed. Mr. Holloway, I don't think, Here's what I think, Clarence. I think Eleanor is spreading lies because she doesn't like that I'm running my ranch my way instead of hers. And I think you do well to remember that my business has kept this bank profitable through 3 bad winters and 2 droughts. So unless you want me to take my accounts to the bank in Silverton, I suggest you treat my employees with respect. Silence filled the bank. The clerk at the back desk had stopped working to watch. Clarence cleared his throat. Of course, Mr. Holloway. No disrespect intended to Miss Whitmore. Good. Cade straightened. Clara, let's go. We're done here. Outside, Clara had to force herself to breathe normally. Her whole body shook with suppressed emotion, anger, humiliation, and something dangerously close to gratitude. That was, she started. Necessary, Cade finished, and not over. Eleanor will push back harder now. Maybe I should... No. Cade turned to face her, expression fierce. Don't finish that sentence. You're not leaving. You're not backing down. We're in this together now, whether Eleanor likes it or not. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to point out that she was dragging him into a fight he didn't need, but she was also tired of running, tired of letting other people's judgment define her. All right, she said quietly. Together. Cade nodded once, satisfied. Then his expression shifted, looking past Clara toward something behind her. Clara turned to see Eleanor Voss emerging from the dress shop across the street, accompanied by 2 women in expensive clothes. All 3 were staring directly at them. Eleanor's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Cade, what a pleasant surprise. She glided across the street, skirt swishing. And Miss Whitmore, how nice to see you in proper attire for once. Clara bit back her first response. Eleanor, Cade's voice was cold. Surprised you're still in town. Thought you'd have headed back east by now. Oh, I'm in no hurry. There's so much to do here, so many people to visit. Eleanor's gaze flicked to Clara, then back to Cade. I've been hearing the most interesting stories about your ranch, about how you've taken in a woman with no references, no family, no background anyone can verify. Some are calling it charitable, others are calling it something else. Let them call it whatever they want, Cade said flatly. But that's just it, darling. What people call things matters. Eleanor stepped closer, lowering her voice to something that sounded almost concerned. I'm worried about you. This woman shows up out of nowhere, gains your trust, has access to your accounts. Don't you see how it looks? How vulnerable it makes you? The only thing I'm vulnerable to is losing my patience with this conversation. Eleanor's mask slipped for just a second, revealing something cold and hard underneath. Then the smile returned. Very well. I can see you're determined to make mistakes. She turned to Clara. I do hope you understand what you're doing, Miss Whitmore. Small towns have long memories. Once your reputation is ruined, it stays ruined, and Cade's right along with it. My reputation was already ruined, Clara said quietly. I've got nothing left to lose. Everyone has something to lose. Eleanor's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The question is whether you're willing to drag others down with you. She swept away before Clara could respond, her companions following like well-dressed shadows. Cade swore under his breath. Ignore her. She's just trying to get in your head. But Clara couldn't ignore it. Because Eleanor was right about one thing. Clara's presence was damaging Cade's standing. And no matter how much he claimed not to care, eventually it would cost him something he couldn't afford to lose. They drove back to the ranch in silence. When they arrived, Miguel was waiting with more bad news. 3 of the steers are missing from the south pasture, he said. Tracks suggest rustlers. Cade's expression went dark. How many riders? At least 2, maybe 3. They knew what they were doing, cut out the best stock, covered their trail. Same group that hit the Morrison Ranch last month? Likely. Miguel glanced at Clara, then back to Cade. Could also be someone sending a message. The implication hung in the air. Eleanor's father had connections to every criminal operation in the territory. If he wanted to pressure Cade, stolen cattle would be an easy way to do it. "Round up whoever's available," Cade said. "We ride at first light. I want those cattle back." Clara stepped forward. "I'm coming with you." "Like hell you are. This isn't fence mending. These men are armed and dangerous." "I can ride. I can shoot." Clara met his eyes. "And I won't sit here waiting while you risk your life for cattle I helped save." Cade looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Clara's expression must have convinced him. "Fine," he said finally. "But you follow orders, no heroics. Understood?" "Understood." Miguel shook his head. "This is a bad idea, boss." "Yeah," Cade agreed. "But when has that ever stopped us?" They rode out at dawn, Cade, Clara, Miguel, and Iris. Tom and Jesse stayed behind to watch the ranch. The trail was easy to follow at first, heading northeast toward the Badlands, where the law rarely ventured. By midday, they'd covered 15 miles of rough country. The tracks led into a narrow canyon with steep walls and limited visibility. "Ambush territory," Miguel muttered. Cade pulled up, studying the canyon entrance. "Could also be the only way through. We go around, we lose a day. Or we go through and lose more than that," Iris said. Clara felt the tension ratchet higher. This was the moment where smart people turned back, where caution won over stubbornness. But Cade didn't turn back. "Single file," he said. "Eyes open, rifles ready." They entered the canyon in silence, hoofbeats echoing off stone walls. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Her palms were slick on the rifle Cade had insisted she carry. They were halfway through when the first shot rang out. The bullet hit the canyon wall 2 feet from Clara's head, spraying rock chips across her face. Her horse reared, nearly throwing her. She grabbed the saddle horn with one hand, rifle clutched in the other, heart slamming into her throat. "Down!" Cade's voice cut through the chaos. "Get behind the rocks." Clara didn't think. She threw herself from the saddle, hitting the ground hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. The rifle skittered from her grip. She scrambled forward on hands and knees while bullets sparked off stone around her. Miguel reached her first, hauling her behind a boulder with one hand while firing upward with the other. "Stay low!" Clara pressed her back against the rock, gasping. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the rifle. This was nothing like the careful target practice Cade had insisted on. This was chaos and noise, and the sick certainty that she was about to die in a canyon miles from anywhere that mattered. "How many?" Cade's voice came from somewhere to her left. "3, maybe 4, Iris answered. "High ground, east wall." Another volley of shots. Clara forced herself to look around the boulder's edge. Movement on the canyon rim, figures silhouetted against the sky. They had the advantage of position and were using it. "We're pinned," Miguel said flatly. "Can't go forward, can't retreat without exposing ourselves." "The horses are scattered." Iris's voice was tight. "We lose them. We're dead out here." Clara's mind raced. The canyon walls were too steep to climb quickly. Going back meant a quarter mile of open ground. Forward was worse. They were trapped, and whoever was shooting knew it. "Stop firing!" a voice called from above. Male, rough, with an accent Clara couldn't place. "We don't want trouble. Just throw down your weapons and ride out." "Like hell," Cade muttered. Then louder. "Those are my cattle you stole. I want them back." Laughter echoed off the canyon walls. "Cattle are long gone, friend. This ain't about beef anymore. This is about you learning to mind your business and stop making enemies." Clara's blood went cold. Miguel had been right. This wasn't random rustling. This was a message. "Who sent you?" Cade shouted. "Was it Voss?" Silence. Then more gunfire, closer this time. A bullet ricocheted off the rock inches from Clara's head. "Next one won't miss," the voice called. "You got one chance. Leave the woman and ride out. She's what this is about anyway." Clara felt the words like a physical blow. Miguel swore viciously. Iris turned to stare at her, eyes wide. Cade's expression went murderous. "Over my dead body." "That can be arranged." The next volley was concentrated and deliberate. Clara realized with sick certainty that they were trying to flush Cade out, make him expose himself. If he died trying to protect her, Eleanor got what she wanted without blood on her hands. "We need to move," Miguel said urgently. "Now, while they're reloading, back toward the entrance. We'll never make it, Iris said. Not all of us. Clara's mind clicked through options with the same strange clarity she felt when diagnosing sick animals. Sometimes you couldn't save everything. Sometimes you had to sacrifice one thing to save the rest. She looked at Cade, at Miguel, at Iris. Good people. People who'd given her a chance when nobody else would. People who were about to die because of her. I'll draw them off, Clara said. The words came out steadier than she felt. Give you time to get to the horses? Absolutely not, Cade snapped. It's the only way. They want me, not you. I'll go out, hands up, unarmed. Once they're focused on me, you ride. Clara, this is my fault. The words burst out of her, raw and desperate. Eleanor's doing this because of me. Those men are shooting because I didn't have the sense to leave when I should have. So let me fix it. Cade grabbed her arm, hard enough to bruise. Listen to me. You don't fix this by surrendering to men who'll kill you the second we're gone. That's not courage. That's suicide. Then what do you suggest? Claire's voice cracked. Because in about 2 minutes they're going to rush us, and we're all dead anyway. Miguel touched Cade's shoulder. Boss, she's got a point. They want her alive, at least long enough to make it look like an accident. That's more time than we've got otherwise. No. Cade's voice was flat, final. We find another way. But there was no other way, and they all knew it. The canyon walls were too steep. The shooters had the high ground. Their ammunition wouldn't last forever. Clara made her decision. Before anyone could stop her, she stood up, hands raised, rifle left behind the rock. Don't shoot. I'm coming out. Clara, get down. Cade lunged for her, but she was already moving, stepping into the open with her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The shooting stopped. Silence fell across the canyon, broken only by her boots crunching on loose stone. Clara walked forward slowly, arms raised, painfully aware of how exposed she was. One bullet, that's all it would take. Smart girl, the voice called from above. Keep walking, your friends can leave now. Clara risked a glance back. Cade stood frozen, rifle raised, face twisted with fury and something that looked like fear. Go, she mouthed. Please. She saw the moment he understood what she was doing, saw the calculation flash across his face, save himself and his people, or die trying to save her. For a terrible second, she thought he'd choose death. Then Miguel grabbed his arm, pulling him back toward the horses. Boss, we have to move, now! Cade didn't lower his rifle. We're coming back for you, he said, voice carrying across the canyon. You hear me, Clara? This isn't over. I know, Clara whispered, though he was too far away to hear. She kept walking until rough hands grabbed her from behind. Someone yanked her arms down, binding her wrists with rope that bit into her skin. A cloth sack went over her head, cutting off her vision. Good choice, a man's voice said close to her ear. Saved your friends' lives. Not sure about your own, though. Clara's stomach lurched as they dragged her forward. She heard horses, the creak of leather, voices discussing something she couldn't quite make out. Then she was lifted and thrown across a saddle like a sack of grain. The horse started moving, and all Clara could do was hang on and pray that Cade was smart enough not to follow them directly into whatever trap Eleanor had prepared. They rode for what felt like hours. Clara lost track of time in the darkness of the hood, body aching from the awkward position, mind racing through increasingly worse scenarios. Finally, the horse stopped. She was dragged down and dumped on hard ground. The hood came off. Clara blinked in the sudden light. They were in some kind of abandoned building, a barn maybe, or an old mining structure. Wooden walls, dirt floor, roof half collapsed to let in slashes of late afternoon sun. 3 men stood around her. The one who'd done the talking was older, 40 or so, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. The other 2 were younger, harder to read. Here's how this works, Scarface said. You're going to write a letter to Cade Holloway. Tell him you're leaving, taking the money you stole from his ranch, heading east. Make it convincing. Clara's mind reeled. I didn't steal anything. Doesn't matter what's true. Matters what people believe. He tossed a pencil and paper at her feet. Write it, or we make things unpleasant. And if I do write it? Scarface smiled. It wasn't reassuring. Then you get to keep breathing, for a while anyway. Clara's hands were still bound. She couldn't write even if she wanted to. This is Eleanor's plan, isn't it? Frame me for theft, make me disappear, clear the path back to Cade. Don't know any Eleanor, Scarface said, but his eyes shifted slightly. We're just doing a job. A job that involves kidnapping and murder. Clara forced her voice steady. That's a hanging offense in this territory. Only if someone proves it. Scarface crouched down to her level. See, the thing is, nobody's going to look too hard for a woman like you. No family, no history, already branded a thief and a liar. You disappear, people shrug and move on. Probably figure you ran off with another man's money. The worst part was that he was right. Nobody would investigate. Nobody would care. She'd vanish, and within a month, people would forget she'd existed. Except Cade. Cade would know. He'd come looking. And Eleanor was probably counting on that too. Another accident waiting to happen. I need my hands free to write, Clara said quietly. Scarface considered this, then nodded to one of the younger men. Cut her loose, but if she tries anything, shoot her. The rope fell away. Clara's wrists were raw, bleeding in places. She picked up the pencil with numb fingers. What do you want me to say? Make it good. Apologetic. Say you never meant to hurt him, but you saw an opportunity and took it. That you're going back east to start over. Scarface smiled again. Make him believe you were playing him from the start. Clara stared at the paper. Her hand shook. If she wrote this letter, it would destroy everything. Her reputation, Cade's trust, any chance of proving Eleanor's involvement. But if she didn't write it, these men would kill her. She thought about her mother, about the strange gift she'd passed down. The ability to sense wrongness, to feel sickness before it showed symptoms. Her mother had always said it was about paying attention to the small details everyone else missed. Clara looked at the three men. Scarface was confident, relaxed. The younger ones were nervous, fidgeting. The one who'd cut her ropes kept glancing at the door. They were expecting someone, or worried someone would show up. Clara started writing. Not the letter they wanted, but something else entirely. She wrote quickly, keeping her body positioned to block their view. What's taking so long? Scarface demanded. I'm trying to make it convincing, Clara said. You want him to believe it, right? That takes time. She kept writing, not a confession, a message, something that would only make sense to someone who knew her. When she finished, she held out the paper. Scarface snatched it, eyes scanning the words. His expression darkened. This isn't what I told you to write. It's what I'm willing to write, Clara said. Take it or leave it. Scarface's hand went to the gun at his hip. Clara's heart stopped. Then a voice called from outside. Someone's coming! Riders! All three men turned toward the door. Clara didn't hesitate. She grabbed the pencil and drove it into Scarface's leg as hard as she could. He screamed, staggering backward. Clara was already moving, diving for the door. The younger men recovered faster than she expected, grabbing for her. She twisted away, barely avoiding their grip. Outside, the sound of hoofbeats grew louder. Clara ran toward it, legs burning, lungs screaming. A gunshot cracked behind her. She felt the bullet pass close enough to hear it, but she didn't stop. Then Cade was there, riding hard with Miguel and Iris flanking him. He swung down before his horse even stopped, catching Clara as her legs gave out. I've got you, he said roughly. I've got you. Gunfire erupted behind them. Miguel and Iris returned fire while Cade hauled Clara onto his horse. They rode out in a chaos of bullets and shouting, Clara clinging to Cade's back, too shaken to do anything but hold on. They didn't stop until they were miles clear, the building a distant speck behind them. Only then did Cade pull up, turning to check her for injuries. Are you hurt? No, scared but not hurt. Clara's whole body trembled. How did you find me? Track them. Miguel's the best tracker in the territory. Cade's hands were gentle but thorough, checking for wounds she might not feel yet. What did they want? A letter, saying I stole from you and ran off. Clara pulled the crumpled paper from where she'd shoved it in her pocket. I didn't write what they wanted. Wrote something else instead. Cade unfolded the paper, reading. His expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something that looked almost like awe. Clara had written, The mare with the ash-colored coat is dying. Only one person can save her. The rest is lies. You wrote a message I'd understand, Cade said quietly. Something that proved coercion. I thought if they killed me, at least you'd know the truth. Clara's voice cracked. That I didn't betray you. Cade's arms came around her, sudden and fierce. You're not dying, not today, not on Eleanor's orders or anyone else's. Clara pressed her face against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of leather and horse and dust. Safe. For now. When they finally pulled apart, Miguel was watching with an expression of grim satisfaction. "We got one of them," he said. "The one you stabbed with a pencil. He's going to talk." Clara's hands were still shaking. "He won't testify against Eleanor. Her father will make sure of it." "Maybe. But now we know she's willing to commit murder." Cade's voice was hard. "That changes things." They rode back to the ranch in tense silence. Tom and Jesse met them at the gate, rifles ready, relaxing only when they saw everyone accounted for. "Trouble?" Tom asked. "Always," Iris said wearily. "But we're still breathing." Clara slid off the horse, legs barely supporting her weight. Everything hurt. Her wrists were raw, her ribs bruised from being thrown across the saddle, her hands bleeding from the ropes. But she was alive. Cade sent the others to tend the horses while he walked Clara to the house. Inside, he poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. "Drink. You've earned it." Clara drank. The whiskey burned going down, but it helped steady her nerves. "Eleanor's not going to stop." "I know." "She'll try again. Different method, same goal." Clara set down the glass. "I should leave, tonight, before someone else gets hurt." "No." Cade's voice was flat. "We're past that now." "Cade, those men tried to kill you today. They would have succeeded if we'd been 10 minutes slower, if Miguel hadn't picked up their trail." His jaw tightened. "Eleanor declared war when she did that, and I'm done playing defense." Clara stared at him. "What are you going to do?" "Fight back." Cade drained his glass in one swallow. "Eleanor thinks she can manipulate this situation because I'm too weak or too honorable to hit back. Time to prove her wrong." "You're talking about going after her father's business interests. I'm talking about exposing what she did. Those men didn't just appear out of nowhere. Someone hired them. Someone paid them. That money leaves a trail." Cade's eyes were hard. "And I'm going to follow it straight back to Eleanor Voss." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to point out that going after someone with Eleanor's resources was suicide, but she was also tired of being hunted, tired of running. "What do you need me to do?" she asked instead. Cade looked at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow, we ride into town and file charges against those men for attempted murder and kidnapping. Force the law to investigate. Make noise. Get people asking questions Eleanor can't afford to have answered. The sheriff is on her father's payroll. Maybe, but the federal marshal isn't." Cade smiled grimly. "An attempted murder on federal land is a federal crime. Sheriff can't bury it even if he wants to." Clara felt a flicker of hope. "You think it'll work?" "I think it's our best shot. And I'm done sitting around waiting for Eleanor to make the next move." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in her small room, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events. The ambush, the kidnapping, the moment she'd thought she was going to die, and the moment Cade had appeared, riding hard, refusing to leave her behind. A soft knock on her door brought her upright. "Yeah?" The door opened. Cade stood in the doorway, still fully dressed. "Couldn't sleep either?" "No." He hesitated, then stepped inside, leaving the door open for propriety's sake. "I wanted to say something about today." Clara sat up fully, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "Okay." "What you did in that canyon, stepping out to draw their fire. That was the bravest and stupidest thing I've ever seen." Cade's voice was rough. "Don't ever do it again." "I was trying to save your life." "And I was trying to save yours." He moved closer, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Clara, if I'd lost you today, those men had killed you while I rode away to save my own skin, I wouldn't have been able to live with that." Clara's throat tightened. "Why not? You barely know me." "That's the thing. I thought I barely knew you." Cade's eyes met hers. "But somewhere over the past few weeks, you became important. Not just as a hand who saved my herd, as a person, someone I trust, someone I—" He trailed off, jaw working. Clara's heart hammered. "Someone you what?" "Someone I can't afford to lose," Cade finished quietly. "The ranch was supposed to be enough. Work and land and building something lasting. After Rachel died, I told myself that's all I needed. But then you showed up in a ruined wedding dress, half dead and completely lost, And you reminded me that there's more to life than just surviving. Clara couldn't breathe. Cade, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. You've been through hell. The last thing you need is me complicating things further. I just needed you to know that you matter, to me, to this ranch, to everyone here, and we're going to fight for you the way you've been fighting for us. Tears pricked Clara's eyes. She blinked them back hard. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just promise me you won't throw yourself in front of any more bullets. I promise to try. Clara managed a shaky smile. Can't guarantee success. Cade almost laughed. Fair enough. He stood, moving toward the door. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be hard. Cade? Clara's voice stopped him. Thank you for coming after me. Always, he said simply. Then he was gone, leaving Clara alone with her racing thoughts and the warmth spreading through her chest. The next morning, they rode into town. All of them, Cade, Clara, Miguel, Iris, even Tom and Jesse, a show of force. The sheriff's office was a small wooden building next to the jail. Sheriff Porter looked up from his desk when they walked in, his expression going from surprise to wariness in an instant. Mr. Holloway, what brings you in with an army? Attempted murder, Cade said flatly. Yesterday, 4 men ambushed us in Canyon Pass. They shot at us, kidnapped Miss Whitmore, and threatened to kill her unless she signed a false confession. Porter's face remained carefully neutral. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime. Cade dropped the crumpled letter on Porter's desk. There's the proof. They wanted her to write a confession of theft. When she wrote something else instead, they tried to kill her. Porter picked up the letter, reading slowly. This doesn't prove anything except that someone wrote something unclear. There's also the man we captured, Miguel said. He's being held at the ranch, ready to testify. Under duress, I imagine. Porter set down the letter. Look, Mr. Holloway, I understand you're upset, but without clear evidence of who hired these men or what their intentions were, there's not much I can do. Then I'll take it to the federal marshal, Cade said. Attempted murder on federal land is his jurisdiction anyway. Porter's expression hardened. Now, there's no need to escalate. The door burst open. Eleanor Voss swept in, followed by a well-dressed man Clara didn't recognize. Sheriff Porter, I'm so glad you're here, Eleanor said breathlessly. I need to report a theft. This woman, she pointed at Clara, stole money from my reticule yesterday while I was shopping. $300. Clara's stomach dropped. Cade's hand went to his gun. That's a lie. Is it? The man with Eleanor stepped forward. I'm Thomas Blackwood, Miss Voss's attorney. I have 3 witnesses who saw Miss Whitmore near my client's carriage yesterday afternoon. Shortly after, the money was discovered missing. I wasn't anywhere near her carriage, Clara said, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. Eleanor's expression was sympathetic, poisonously so. I understand times are hard, dear, and you've been through so much. But stealing is a crime. Sheriff, I want her arrested. Porter looked uncomfortable. Miss Voss, perhaps we should arrested, Eleanor repeated firmly. Unless Mr. Holloway would like to make restitution on her behalf, I'm willing to drop charges if the money is returned. The trap snapped shut. Clara saw it clearly now. If Cade paid, it looked like an admission of guilt. If he didn't, Clara went to jail on false charges. Either way, Eleanor won. This is ridiculous, Iris snapped. Clara was at the ranch all day yesterday. We can prove it. Can you? Blackwood smiled. Because I have sworn statements from 3 upstanding citizens who say otherwise, unless you're suggesting they're all lying. I'm suggesting someone paid them to lie, Cade said. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Holloway, one you'll need proof for. Blackwood pulled out a document. Sheriff Porter, this is a formal complaint. I trust you'll do your duty. Porter's hand went to the handcuffs on his belt. Miss Whitmore, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. No. Cade stepped between Clara and the sheriff. You arrest her. You'll have to go through me first. Cade, don't, Clara said quietly. It's okay. It's not okay. This is a setup and everyone knows it. Then we'll prove it in court. Clara touched his arm. Let me do this. Fighting the sheriff won't help. She could see Cade struggling with the decision, saw the moment he realized she was right. Resisting arrest would only make things worse. He stepped aside, but his eyes stayed on Eleanor. This isn't over. No, Eleanor agreed softly. It's not. Porter cuffed Clara's wrists, the metal cold against her skin. She'd been bound twice in 2 days now. It was starting to feel like a permanent condition. As Porter led her toward the jail cells, Clara looked back once. Cade stood frozen, hands clenched into fists, face twisted with fury and helplessness. Clara tried to give him a reassuring smile. Wasn't sure she succeeded. The cell door clanged shut with a finality that made her chest constrict. Through the barred window, she could see Eleanor and her lawyer leaving, both looking satisfied. Clara sank onto the thin cot and let herself shake. She'd survived Jonathan Hayes abandoning her, survived the town's judgment, survived poisoned cattle and ambushes and kidnapping. But sitting in this cell, knowing Eleanor was systematically destroying every chance she had at a future, Clara felt something inside her crack. Maybe the frontier had finally broken her after all. Then she remembered Cade's voice in the canyon. "We're coming back for you." And Miguel's words, "She's what this is about anyway." And her own hands, driving a pencil into a man's leg without hesitation. No, she wasn't broken, just bent. And bent things could still fight back. Clara stood up, walked to the cell door, and started planning. The jail cell smelled like rust and old sweat. Clara counted the cracks in the ceiling, 17 major ones, dozens of smaller splits branching off like veins. She'd been counting them for 3 hours, trying to keep her mind occupied with something other than the reality of her situation. She was locked up on false charges. Eleanor's witnesses would lie under oath. The sheriff was either bought or too scared of the Voss family to care about the truth. And somewhere outside these walls, Cade was probably doing something reckless that would only make everything worse. Footsteps in the hallway made her sit up. Sheriff Porter appeared, looking uncomfortable. Behind him stood a woman Clara didn't recognize, late 30s, dressed in severe gray, carrying a leather satchel. "You have a visitor," Porter said. "Legal counsel." The woman stepped into view. "Margaret Chen, I'm an attorney from Silverton. Mr. Holloway retained my services this morning." Clara blinked. "Cade hired you?" "He did. Rode 20 miles before dawn to reach my office." Margaret's voice was crisp, professional. "May I speak with my client privately, Sheriff?" Porter hesitated, then nodded. 10 minutes. I'll be right outside." When the door closed, Margaret pulled a stool close to the cell bars and sat. "Let's be efficient. Tell me exactly what happened, leaving nothing out." Clara did. The ambush, the kidnapping, the forced letter, Eleanor's accusation in the sheriff's office. Margaret took notes in a small leather book, her expression unreadable. "The witnesses Eleanor produced," Margaret said when Clara finished. "Do you know who they are?" "No, I've never seen them before yesterday." "That's actually good. Makes it easier to prove fabrication." Margaret tapped her pencil against the notebook. "Here's our situation. The theft charge is weak. 3 witnesses claiming they saw you near a carriage isn't proof you took anything. But it's enough to hold you for arraignment. That's scheduled for tomorrow morning." Clara's stomach sank. "What happens then?" "Judge Harmon will hear the charges. He's not on the Voss payroll, but he's conservative and doesn't like disruption. If Eleanor's lawyer presents a compelling case, he might bind you over for trial. That means weeks in this cell waiting for a circuit judge." "Weeks?" "Possibly months." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "I won't lie to you, Miss Whitmore. This is a dangerous situation. Eleanor Voss has resources and connections. She's playing a long game." "What's the short game?" Clara asked. "Because I don't have months." Margaret studied her for a moment. "The short game is forcing her hand, making her reveal herself before she can build an airtight case. But that's risky." "Everything's risky at this point." "True." Margaret stood, gathering her things. "Mr. Holloway said you're tougher than you look. I hope he's right, because tomorrow is going to test that." After she left, Clara lay back on the thin cot and stared at the ceiling cracks again. Somewhere outside, the sun was setting. She could see a slice of orange sky through the high window. She thought about the ranch, about Ash, the gray mare who'd been the first animal she'd saved, about Miguel's quiet respect and Iris's grudging acceptance, about Cade's hands, rough and gentle at the same time, checking her for injuries after the kidnapping, about the way he'd said, "Someone I can't afford to lose." Clara closed her eyes. She'd survived this. She had to. The night dragged. Clara dozed fitfully, waking at every sound. Once she heard shouting outside, male voices, angry. She couldn't make out words, but she recognized Cade's tone. He was out there fighting for her while she sat locked in a cage. Morning came gray and cold. Porter brought weak coffee and hardtack that tasted like sawdust. Clara forced herself to eat anyway. She'd need her strength. At 9 o'clock, Porter unlocked the cell. Arraignment's in 30 minutes. You'll be cuffed for transport. Is that necessary? The courthouse is across the street. Regulations. His voice was apologetic but firm. Sorry, Miss Whitmore. The handcuffs felt familiar now. Clara walked out of the jail with her head up, refusing to show weakness. A small crowd had gathered outside the courthouse, curious townspeople, probably hoping for entertainment. Clara spotted Cade immediately. He stood near the courthouse steps with Miguel and Iris flanking him like bodyguards. When he saw her, something fierce and protective flashed across his face. Eleanor was there too, of course. She stood with her lawyer and 3 well-dressed strangers who had to be the lying witnesses. Eleanor's expression was serene, almost sympathetic. It made Clara want to spit. The courthouse was a single room with benches, a raised platform for the judge, and windows that let in weak morning light. Judge Harmon was already seated, an older man with iron gray hair and the weathered look of someone who'd spent years riding circuit through hard country. All rise for the arraignment of Clara Whitmore, the bailiff called. Clara stood beside Margaret Chen. Her legs shook, but she locked her knees and kept her face neutral. Judge Harmon reviewed the documents in front of him. Miss Whitmore, you're charged with theft of $300 from Miss Eleanor Voss. How do you plead? Not guilty, Your Honor. Clara's voice came out steady. Your Honor, Thomas Blackwood stood smoothly. The prosecution has 3 witnesses who place Miss Whitmore at the scene of the theft. We also have evidence that she's been living beyond her means, wearing clothes and using resources inconsistent with her station. This suggests both motive and opportunity. Margaret stood. Those resources are wages earned through legitimate employment at the Holloway Ranch. As for the witnesses, we question their credibility and intend to prove they were paid to provide false testimony. That's a serious accusation, Miss Chen, Harmon said. It's a serious case, Your Honor. My client has been the target of a sustained campaign of harassment by Miss Voss, including a kidnapping attempt just 2 days ago. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Eleanor's expression didn't change, but Blackwood stood quickly. Your Honor, these wild claims are clearly an attempt to deflect from the actual crime. Miss Voss is the victim here, not the defendant. Perhaps both are victims, Margaret said, of a system that allows wealth and influence to manipulate justice. Harmon's eyes narrowed. Miss Chen, I won't have my courtroom turned into a political forum. Stick to the facts. The facts are these, Your Honor. Miss Whitmore was at the Holloway Ranch the entire day of the alleged theft. We have 4 witnesses who can corroborate this. Mr. Holloway, Miguel Reyes, Iris Blackwood, and Thomas Parker, all respected members of this community. Respected by whom? Blackwood interjected. Mr. Holloway is known to have poor judgment when it comes to hiring. Miguel Reyes is Mexican. Iris Blackwood is an unmarried woman doing men's work. And Thomas Parker is barely out of boyhood. These are hardly credible character witnesses. Clara felt rage burn through her chest. She started to speak, but Margaret's hand on her arm stopped her. Your Honor, Margaret said calmly, Mr. Blackwood just revealed his case has nothing to do with evidence and everything to do with prejudice. He's not interested in justice. He's interested in destroying a young woman whose only crime was refusing to be intimidated by someone with more money and power. The courtroom erupted, people shouting, the bailiff calling for order. Harmon slammed his gavel repeatedly. Silence! I will have order or I'll clear this courtroom. The noise died down. Harmon looked between Margaret and Blackwood, clearly irritated with both. Here's what's going to happen, he said. I'm setting a preliminary hearing for 3 days from now. Both sides will present witnesses and evidence. Until then, Miss Whitmore will remain in custody. Your Honor, my client poses no flight risk, Margaret protested. She has steady employment and strong ties to the community. She also has no family, no property, and every reason to run, Blackwood countered. The bail should be set high to ensure her appearance. Harmon considered. Bail is set at $500. Clara's heart sank. $500 might as well be $5,000. She didn't have it. Cade didn't have it either, not in liquid cash. Your Honor, that's excessive for a first time. My decision is final, Miss Chen. Harmon gathered his papers. 3 days. Come prepared to prove your claims. Court is adjourned. Porter took Clara's arm, guiding her back toward the jail. She caught Cade's eye as she passed. He looked like he wanted to tear the courthouse apart with his bare hands. Outside, away from the crowd, Porter spoke quietly. For what it's worth, I think this whole thing stinks, but I've got a family to feed. Can't afford to make enemies. Clara understood. Fear was easier than courage. I know. Back in the cell, Clara paced. 3 days until the hearing. 3 days for Eleanor to shore up her false witnesses, maybe produce more evidence Clara couldn't refute. 3 days of sitting helpless while her fate was decided by people who'd already made up their minds. Footsteps again. This time it was Margaret Chen, looking grim. I spoke with your employer, she said without preamble. He's trying to raise bail money, but it's difficult. Most of his capital is tied up in land and livestock. The bank won't extend credit against the ranch. I didn't expect him to pay it anyway. He's determined. Miguel and Iris are asking around town, seeing if anyone will contribute. Margaret's expression said she didn't think that would work. In the meantime, I need you to help me build our defense. Tell me everything you know about Eleanor Voss. Everything. Clara spent the next hour recounting Eleanor's visits to the ranch, her veiled threats, the way she'd turned the town against Clara with careful gossip. Margaret took notes, asking sharp questions. The kidnapping is our strongest card, Margaret said finally. If we can prove Eleanor hired those men, it undermines everything, makes her look like the aggressor. She'll deny it. Her father will make sure there's no connection. Probably. But I've been doing this a long time, Miss Whitmore. Rich people get sloppy when they think they're untouchable. Somewhere there's a trail, money changing hands, a witness who knows too much, a detail that doesn't line up. Margaret stood. I'm going to dig. You sit tight. Easier said than done. Clara sat tight for another day and night, watching the light move across the floor, listening to the town sounds outside. Twice she heard Cade's voice, arguing with Porter. The second time, Porter threatened to arrest him for disturbing the peace. On the second morning, Iris appeared at the cell bars. Porter had allowed her inside, probably because he felt guilty. Brought you something better than Porter's slop. Iris handed through a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside was real food, bread, cheese, dried beef. How you holding up? I've been worse. Clara wasn't sure that was true, but it sounded better than admitting she was terrified. How's the ranch? Fine. Jesse and Tom are handling things. Cade's losing his mind, though. Barely sleeps. Spent all yesterday riding to every ranch within 50 miles trying to borrow bail money. Iris's expression was hard to read. He really cares about you. Clara's throat tightened. I know. Do you? Iris leaned against the bars. Because from where I'm standing, you're still expecting to lose. Still planning your exit. I'm being realistic. You're being scared. Iris's voice wasn't unkind. Look, when I first met you, I thought you were dead weight. Some city girl playing farm dress-up. But you proved me wrong. You worked harder than men twice your size. You saved animals everyone else gave up on. You stabbed a kidnapper with a damn pencil. Iris smiled slightly. You're tougher than you think, Clara. Stop acting like you're already beaten. Before Clara could respond, shouting erupted outside. Male voices, angry and getting louder. Iris straightened. That's Cade. They heard the front door bang open. Heavy footsteps, then Cade's voice, loud enough to carry through the walls. I want to see her, now. Mr. Holloway, visiting hours? I don't care about visiting hours. Either let me see her or arrest me too. Porter's resigned sigh was audible even from the cell. 5 minutes, that's all you get. Cade appeared, looking like he'd been dragged through hell backward. His clothes were dusty, his face unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. But when he saw Clara, relief flooded his expression. You okay? I'm fine. You look terrible. Thanks. He gripped the bars, knuckles white. Listen, I don't have much time. Margaret found something. One of Eleanor's witnesses, man named Robert Grimes, has a gambling debt at the saloon. Big one. It got paid off the same day he agreed to testify against you. Clara's pulse quickened. Can she prove Eleanor paid it? Working on it. The saloon owner keeps records. If we can show Grimes got money from the Voss accounts, it proves witness tampering. Eleanor's too smart to use her own accounts. Maybe. But her father's business manager isn't as careful. Margaret's pulling bank records now. Cade's expression was fierce. We're going to beat this, Clara, I promise. Clara wanted to believe him, but she'd been disappointed too many times. What if we can't? What if the judge doesn't care about the evidence? Then I break you out and we run. Cade said it like he meant it. Mexico, Canada, somewhere they can't touch us. I don't care. I'm not letting you rot in jail for a crime you didn't commit. You'd lose everything. The ranch, your reputation. I don't care. His voice cracked. Rachel's gone. The ranch is just land and buildings. But you're here, you're real, and I'm not losing someone else. He stopped, jaw working. Clara's heart hammered. Someone you what? Cade looked at her, and Clara saw everything he wasn't saying written across his face. Fear and hope and something raw that made her chest ache. Time's up, Holloway, Porter said from the doorway. Cade didn't move. 3 more minutes? Now, or I call the bailiff. Cade swore viciously but stepped back from the bars. 3 days. That's all we need. 3 days, and this is over. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. After he left, Iris gave Clara a knowing look. Still think you're going to lose? Clara didn't answer. The 3rd day arrived like a storm on the horizon, inevitable and dangerous. Clara woke before dawn, unable to sleep. Porter brought breakfast, but she couldn't eat. Margaret arrived early, looking energized. We got him. Grimes. He cracked last night after Margaret confronted him with the payment records. He admitted Eleanor's father's business manager paid him $200 to claim he saw you near the carriage. Clara's hands shook. Will he testify to that? He already did. Gave a sworn statement to the federal marshal this morning. Margaret's smile was sharp. Eleanor doesn't know yet. We're saving it for the hearing. The courtroom was packed when they arrived. Seemed like half the territory had shown up to watch. Clara saw Cade in the front row with Miguel, Iris, Tom, and Jessie. Their presence steadied her. Eleanor sat across the aisle looking immaculate in emerald silk, completely composed, like this was just another social event. Judge Harmon entered, and everyone stood. When they sat again, the room crackled with tension. This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of the Territory versus Clara Whitmore, Harmon said. Mr. Blackwood, present your case. Blackwood stood smoothly. Your Honor, the prosecution will show that the defendant, a woman of no fixed address and questionable character, stole $300 from Miss Eleanor Voss on the afternoon of October 15th. We have 3 witnesses who place her at the scene. He called his first witness, a woman named Sarah Pritchard, who claimed she saw Clara near Eleanor's carriage. Her testimony was smooth, practiced, too practiced. Margaret stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Pritchard, how much did the Voss family pay you to lie today? The courtroom erupted. Blackwood shot to his feet. Objection! Counsel is making baseless accusations. I can prove it's not baseless, Your Honor, Margaret said calmly. She held up a document. This is a bank statement showing a deposit of $150 into Mrs. Pritchard's account on October 16th, the day after she agreed to testify. The money came from Voss Family Holdings. Pritchard's face went white. That was for lying under oath? Margaret's voice was cold. That's perjury, Mrs. Pritchard. A felony. Harmon slammed his gavel. Order! Mrs. Pritchard, you will answer the question. But Pritchard was already standing, gathering her skirts. I need to leave. I'm not feeling well. Sit down, Harmon ordered. Bailiff, make sure she doesn't leave this courtroom. Blackwood tried to recover. Your Honor, even if one witness is compromised, we have 2 others. Actually, you don't, Margaret called out. The prosecution may call Robert Grimes. Grimes entered looking sick. He took the stand with shaking hands. Mr. Grimes, Margaret said, did you witness Miss Whitmore committing any theft? No, ma'am. Did someone pay you to say you did? Grimes swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Warren, who manages the Voss accounts. He gave me $200 to testify I saw Miss Whitmore near the carriage. The courtroom exploded. Clara heard Eleanor's sharp intake of breath, saw her exchange a panicked look with Blackwood. Harmon's gavel slammed repeatedly. Order! I will have order! When the noise died down, Margaret continued. Mr. Grimes, did anyone else know about this arrangement? I don't know, ma'am. Warren said it was important business, that Miss Voss needed help dealing with a dangerous woman. Grimes looked at Clara, then away. I needed the money. I'm sorry. Margaret turned to Harmon. Your Honor, the prosecution's case is built entirely on purchase testimony. Every witness was paid by the Voss family to lie. This is witness tampering, conspiracy to commit perjury, and malicious prosecution. I move for immediate dismissal of all charges. Blackwood stood, face red. Your Honor, these allegations against my client are inflammatory and backed by bank records and sworn testimony, Margaret interrupted. Would you like to add obstruction of justice to Miss Voss's charges? Eleanor stood, finally losing her composure. This is absurd. That woman is a criminal and a liar. She seduced Cade Holloway and wormed her way into his life for money. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows what you told them, Margaret said, but the evidence shows you fabricated a crime to destroy an innocent woman. The question is why? Because she doesn't belong here. Eleanor's voice rose, sharp and desperate. She's nothing, nobody. A runaway bride who got exactly what she deserved. Cade should have thrown her out the day she showed up, but instead he... She stopped, realizing what she'd revealed. The courtroom had gone silent. Judge Harmon leaned forward. Miss Voss, are you admitting this prosecution was personal rather than criminal in nature? Eleanor's lawyer grabbed her arm, whispering urgently. She shook him off. Personal? Yes, it's personal. I've watched that woman take everything that should have been mine. Cade was supposed to marry me. This ranch was supposed to be ours. But he chose a Mexican farm girl instead, and when she died, I thought... Eleanor's voice cracked. I waited. I came back, and he replaced Rachel with some broken thing he found in a barn. Clara felt the words like slaps, but she kept her face neutral, gave Eleanor nothing. Cade stood. Your Honor, I'd like to address the court. Sit down, Mr. Holloway, Harmon said, but without heat. With respect, Your Honor, I won't. Cade moved into the center aisle. Miss Voss is right about one thing. I did choose Rachel over her, and I'd make that choice 1,000 more times because Rachel was honest and brave and everything Eleanor will never be. Eleanor's face twisted. And you're right that Clara Whitmore showed up at my ranch with nothing, Cade continued. She was broken and scared and had every reason to give up. But she didn't. She saved my animals when nobody else could. She worked harder than any hand I've hired. She risked her life to protect people she barely knew. That's not weakness, Eleanor. That's strength you'll never understand. How touching, Eleanor spat. The rough frontiersman defending his pet charity case. She's not a charity case. Cade's voice was quiet, but carried through the courtroom. She's the woman I love, and I'm not letting you destroy her to satisfy your ego. The courtroom erupted again. Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Did Cade just, in front of everyone? Harmon's gavel slammed. Enough! All of you, sit down and be quiet. Slowly, order returned. Harmon looked exhausted. Based on the evidence presented, he said heavily, I'm dismissing all charges against Clara Whitmore. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the federal marshal for investigation of witness tampering, perjury, and conspiracy. Miss Voss, Mr. Blackwood, you're both ordered to remain in the territory pending that investigation. Eleanor's face went ashen. Blackwood started to protest, but Harmon cut him off. This hearing is concluded. Miss Whitmore, you're free to go. Porter unlocked Clara's handcuffs. The metal fell away, and for a moment she just stood there, stunned. Free. She was free. The courtroom dissolved into chaos, people talking, arguing, demanding explanations. Clara pushed through the crowd, not looking at anyone, just needing air. Outside, she leaned against the courthouse wall and gulped down deep breaths. The autumn sun was warm on her face. She could hear birds singing. She was free. Clara, she turned. Cade stood a few feet away, looking uncertain, like he wasn't sure she wanted him near her. You told the whole town you loved me, Clara said. Her voice shook. I did. That's going to cause problems. More gossip. Make things harder. I know. Eleanor's father will come after you now. After the ranch. He won't let this go. Probably not. Cade stepped closer. But I meant what I said. Every word. Clara's eyes burned. I don't know if I can love you back. I don't know if I'm capable of that anymore. Jonathan broke something in me. Jonathan was a coward who didn't deserve you, Cade said. "And I'm not asking you to love me. I'm just asking you to stay. Let me prove that not every man is a liar. Let me show you what you're worth." Clara wanted to say yes, wanted to fall into his arms and believe everything would be fine. But she'd believed before, and it had destroyed her. "I need time," she whispered, "to figure out who I am when I'm not running or fighting or surviving." "Take all the time you need," Cade's voice was rough. "I'll be there. At the ranch. Waiting." Miguel appeared, clearing his throat. "Boss, we should go. Eleanor's making threats about her father's lawyers." Cade nodded, but didn't move. His eyes stayed on Clara. "Come home when you're ready," he said quietly. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Clara standing alone in the afternoon sun. She watched him go. This man who'd risked everything to save her. This man who'd told a courtroom full of people he loved her without hesitation. This man who terrified her because she was starting to believe him. Margaret Chen appeared at her elbow. "You did well in there." "I barely said anything." "Exactly. You let the evidence speak." Margaret handed her a card. "If Eleanor's father tries anything, call me. I'm not done with this case yet." After Margaret left, Clara walked through town. People stared, but nobody spoke to her. The whispers followed her like shadows. She ended up at the general store. Howard Beckett looked up nervously when she entered. "Miss Whitmore, I heard about the trial. Congratulations." Clara nodded. "I need supplies, trail rations for 3 days, and a map of the territory." Howard's eyes widened. "You leaving?" "Maybe. Haven't decided yet." She paid with the small wages Cade had given her before the arrest and walked out carrying the supplies. The map crinkled in her pocket, a promise of escape. She could leave. Right now. Just walk away from this town, this ranch, this complicated man who'd upended everything she thought she knew about trust. But as she stood on the town's main street, watching the sun sink toward the mountains, Clara thought about Ash waiting in her stall, about Miguel's quiet respect and Iris's grudging friendship, about fence lines needing repair and cattle that would get sick again without someone who understood them, about Cade's voice saying, "The woman I love," like it was simple truth instead of terrifying complexity. Clara looked at the road leading out of town. Then she looked at the road leading back to the ranch. She stood there for a long time, trying to decide which direction would hurt less. Finally, she started walking. Clara walked toward the ranch, not away from it. She hadn't consciously decided. Her feet just carried her in that direction while her mind churned through fear and possibility. The sun dropped lower, painting the hills in shades of copper and gold, and she kept walking. By the time the ranch came into view, full dark was settling. Lamplight glowed in the main house windows. Clara could see figures moving inside, probably Cade and the hands eating dinner, talking about the day. Normal things, like her world hadn't just been shaken apart and reassembled into an unfamiliar shape. She stopped at the barn instead of going to the house. Needed a moment before facing anyone. Inside, the familiar smell of hay and horses wrapped around her like a blanket. Ash nickered softly from her stall. Clara walked over, resting her forehead against the mare's warm neck. "Hey girl, miss me?" The horse nuzzled her shoulder, and Clara felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. Animals didn't lie, didn't manipulate. They either trusted you or they didn't, and Ash trusted her. "Thought you might have left." Clara turned. Miguel stood in the barn doorway, silhouetted against the last light. "I thought about it," Clara admitted. "But you came back." "I came back." Clara stroked Ash's neck, not looking at him. "I don't know if that was smart." Miguel walked closer, leaning against the stall. "Smart's overrated. I did the smart thing once, stayed quiet when my father got cheated out of wages by a mine owner, didn't make trouble, kept my head down." His voice went hard. "He died broke and broken, while the mine owner got rich. Smart didn't help him. Didn't help anyone." Clara met his eyes. What would have helped? Fighting, making noise, refusing to let powerful people get away with destroying the powerless. Miguel's expression softened. "You fought, Clara. You could have confessed to something you didn't do, made it easier on everyone. But you didn't. That took guts. It took desperation. That's different." "No," Miguel said quietly. "It's not. Desperate people give up all the time. You didn't. That's the difference." Before Clara could respond, the barn door opened again. Cade stood there, and even in the dim light, Clara could see the tension in his shoulders. "I'll check the south fence," Miguel said, giving Clara a meaningful look before disappearing into the night. Cade walked toward her slowly, like approaching a spooked horse. "Wasn't sure you'd come back." "Wasn't sure I would either." They stood in awkward silence. Clara searched for words and came up empty. Everything felt too big, too complicated to fit into language. "I shouldn't have said what I said in court," Cade finally spoke. "Not like that. Not publicly. You deserved better than having your business announced to the whole territory." "You meant it, though. What you said. Every word." His voice was rough. "But that doesn't make it right, putting that on you when you've got enough to deal with." Clara turned back to Ash, fingers working through the mare's mane. "Jonathan told me he loved me. The day before the wedding. Said it looking right in my eyes, and I believed him completely. Then he disappeared with everything I had." Kay didn't interrupt. "So when you say it," Clara continued, voice shaking, "all I can think is, how do I know? How do I know you're not just another man who wants something from me? Who'll take what he needs and leave me with nothing?" "You don't know," Cade said simply. "That's the thing about trust. There's no guarantee. No proof. You just have to decide if someone's earned the chance to prove themselves." Clara laughed bitterly. "That's asking a lot." "Yeah, it is." Cade moved closer, stopping just outside her space. "But for what it's worth, I'm not asking you to trust me because I said some words in a courtroom. I'm asking you to look at what I've done. I hired you when nobody else would. I stood up to Eleanor and her father when it would have been easier to cut you loose. I rode into an ambush to get you back. I risked my ranch, my reputation, everything I've built." "Maybe you're just stubborn." "Definitely stubborn," Cade agreed, "but also honest." "I don't know how to be anything else, Clara. Rachel used to say it was my best and worst quality. I'm too direct for polite society, too rigid for politics. But I don't lie. Ever. So when I tell you I love you, that's not manipulation. That's just truth." Clara's eyes burned. She blinked hard, refusing to cry. "I don't know if I can love you back. I don't know if I remember how." "Then don't. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Cade's voice was steady. "Just stay. Work the ranch. Save animals. Give yourself time to heal. And if you ever decide you want more, I'll be here. If you don't, I'll still be here. Just in a different way." Clara finally turned to look at him directly. "Why? Why would you settle for that? Because having you here, even just as a friend and a hand, is better than not having you at all." Cade's expression was open, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "I've been alone for 4 years, Clara. I'm good at alone. But I don't want to be anymore. So whatever you're willing to give, I'll take it." The words hit something deep in Clara's chest. She'd spent so long expecting rejection, preparing for abandonment, that someone actively choosing to stay felt almost incomprehensible. "I'm not easy to be around," she whispered. "I'm angry a lot. Scared. I wake up at night thinking about Jonathan and Eleanor and all the ways people have hurt me. It might never get better." "Might not," Kate agreed, "but it also might. Either way, you don't have to deal with it alone." Clara looked at this man who'd found her in his barn, wearing a ruined wedding dress, and somehow decided she was worth fighting for. Who'd stood in a courtroom and declared his love in front of people who'd mock him for it, who was offering her time and space and patience without demanding anything in return. She thought about what Miguel had said, about fighting instead of staying quiet, about refusing to let powerful people destroy the powerless. She'd been powerless her whole life. Let people make decisions for her, shape her path, define her worth. Jonathan, her aunt, the town, Eleanor. Maybe it was time to decide something for herself. "Okay," Claire said. "I'll stay." Relief flooded Cade's face. "Yeah? Yeah. But we do this slow. I need time." "As much as you need." Cade's smile was tentative but real. "Thank you." They stood in the barn, surrounded by horses and lamplight, and the solid reality of wood and earth. It wasn't romance, wasn't fireworks or grand gestures. Just two damaged people choosing to exist in the same space and see what happened. It was enough. The next weeks fell into a rhythm. Clara worked the ranch alongside the hands, and slowly the whispers in town began to fade. People found new scandals to discuss. Eleanor and her lawyer left the territory after the federal marshal filed formal charges. Her father's business took a hit when other ranchers started asking uncomfortable questions about labor practices and land deals. Clara watched it all from a distance, feeling strangely detached. The woman who'd stood in that courtroom fighting for her life seemed like someone else now. She was still scared sometimes, still woke up gasping from nightmares about Jonathan or Eleanor or jail cells. But the fear was manageable. Shared. Cade kept his word about going slow. He didn't push, didn't demand, just worked beside her and made her laugh occasionally, and was there when the nightmares got bad. Miguel and Iris became actual friends, instead of just co-workers. Tom and Jesse started treating her like one of the hands instead of a curiosity. The ranch felt less like a refuge and more like home. 2 months after the trial, Claire was working in the barn when she heard unfamiliar voices. She walked outside to find a couple standing with Cade, young, dressed in traveling clothes, looking exhausted. "Clara," Cade called. "Come here a minute." She approached cautiously. The woman had a baby wrapped against her chest, maybe 3 months old. The man held a small girl by the hand, no more than 5 years old. "This is David and Ruth Morrison," Cade said. "Their ranch burned down 3 days ago. Lightning strike. They've got nowhere to go." Clara saw it immediately, the desperate hope in their eyes, the shame of having to ask for help. She recognized that look. Had worn it herself not long ago. "The bunkhouse has space," Clara said before Cade could continue. "And we need extra hands for spring branding anyway." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "We can't pay much. Not until we rebuild." "Room and board plus wages," Clara said firmly. "Same as everyone else. You work, you get paid." David looked at Cade. "That acceptable to you, Mr. Holloway?" Cade's eyes met Clara's, something warm and proud in his expression. "Clara runs the hiring now. If she says you're in, you're in." After the Morrisons settled into the bunkhouse, Cade found Clara in the barn again. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yes, I did." Clara didn't look at him, focusing on brushing Ash's coat. "Someone gave me a chance when I needed it. Seemed right to pass it along. You know they might not work out, might cause problems." "Might." Clara finally turned to face him. "But probably they'll be fine. People usually are when you give them a shot." Cade studied her face. "You're different, since the trial." "How?" "Stronger, more settled." He moved closer. "Like you finally believe you deserve to be here." Clara considered that. Maybe he was right. She didn't wake up every morning waiting for someone to throw her out anymore. Didn't apologize for taking up space. The change was subtle, but real. "I learned something," she said slowly, "about myself, about people." "What's that?" "That running doesn't actually solve anything. I ran from St. Louis, ran from my aunt, even thought about running from here." Clara set down the brush. "But the thing about running is you take yourself with you, the fear, the shame, the damage. It doesn't matter where you go. You're still you." "So what's the solution?" "Standing still long enough to heal. Letting people help. Fighting for what matters instead of just surviving." Clara met his eyes. "You taught me that. You and Miguel and Iris and everyone here. You showed me what it looks like when people actually mean what they say." Cade's throat worked. "Clara, I'm not done." She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "I said I needed time, and I did. But I've had it now, and I've been thinking about what you said in court, about loving me." Cade went very still. "Yeah? I think I might love you too." The words came out shakier than she intended. "I don't know for sure. I've only loved one other person, and that was my mother, so I don't have much reference. But when I think about leaving here, about not seeing you every day, it hurts. And when Eleanor tried to take you away from me, I wanted to burn her whole world down. So if that's love, then yeah, I love you." Cade's expression cracked open into something raw and hopeful. "You sure? Because you don't have to say it just because I did. There's no pressure." Clara kissed him. It wasn't practiced or smooth. She was out of practice and nervous, and her hands shook when they gripped his shirt. But Cade's arms came around her solid and sure, and for the first time since Jonathan Hayes had destroyed her faith in men, Clara felt safe in someone's embrace. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Cade rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to mess this up sometimes," he said roughly. I'm stubborn and blunt, and I work too much. Rachel used to say I had the emotional range of a fence post. Clara laughed despite herself. I'm damaged and scared, and I don't trust easy. We're both disasters. Perfect match, then. They stood in the barn holding each other while the horses shifted in their stalls and late afternoon light slanted through the boards. It wasn't a fairy tale, wasn't perfect or uncomplicated, just two broken people choosing to be broken together and see if they could build something new from the pieces. Clara thought about the woman who'd stumbled into this barn months ago, terrified, alone, convinced she had nothing left worth saving. That woman would never have believed this moment was possible. But people could change, grow, learn to trust again despite every reason not to. Maybe that was the real gift the frontier gave her. Not freedom from pain, but the space to transform it into something else. Something harder and more resilient. 6 months after the trial, on a cold spring morning with frost still clinging to the grass, Claire and Cade stood in front of a small crowd in the ranch yard. Not a church this time. No fancy dress or elaborate ceremony. Just Clara in a simple blue dress that had belonged to Rachel, and Cade in his best clothes with his hair actually combed for once. Miguel stood as witness along with Iris, both looking pleased in their different ways. The Morrisons were there with their children, Tom and Jesse, a few ranchers from neighboring properties who'd become allies after Eleanor's scandal broke. The minister was the same one who would have married Clara to Jonathan Hayes. He'd apologized for believing the lies, and Clara had accepted because holding grudges was exhausting and life was too short. Do you, Cade Holloway, take Clara Whitmore to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Clara Whitmore, take Cade Holloway to be your lawfully wedded husband? Clara looked at Cade's face, weathered and honest and completely hers, thought about the journey that had brought her here, the betrayal and pain and desperate fight for survival, thought about the woman she'd been and the woman she was becoming. I do. The minister smiled. Then by the power vested in me by the territory, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Holloway. Cade did, thoroughly, while the small crowd cheered and whistled. When they finally broke apart, Clara was laughing and crying at the same time. This was what a real wedding felt like. Not performance or spectacle, but commitment. Choosing someone every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The celebration afterward was simple, food and music and dancing in the yard. Clara found herself pulled into conversations with people who'd shunned her months ago, but were friendly now. Forgiveness came easier when you stopped being scandal and became success. Later, when the sun was setting and most people had drifted away, Clara stood at the paddock fence watching Ash and the other horses graze. Cade appeared beside her, draping his jacket over her shoulders against the evening chill. Happy? He asked. Clara considered the question seriously. Was she happy? Not in the uncomplicated way she'd imagined happiness as a girl. Not the fairy tale version where everything was perfect and nothing hurt, but there was peace in knowing she'd survived the worst and come out stronger. Satisfaction in the ranch she'd helped save, the animals she'd healed, the people she'd earned respect from through hard work instead of charm, contentment in standing beside a man who'd proven his words with actions over and over. Yeah, she said. I'm happy. Good. Cade pulled her closer. Because I plan to keep you that way for a very long time. Clara leaned into him, watching the sky turn purple and gold. In the distance, she could hear Miguel laughing at something Iris said. The horses nickered softly. Wood smoke from the dinner fire drifted on the wind. She thought about the girl who'd walked out of that church in St. Louis wearing a ruined dress and carrying nothing but shame. That girl had thought her life was over, had believed one man's betrayal defined her worth. She'd been wrong. What defined Clara wasn't what Jonathan took from her, but what she'd built from nothing. Not the town's judgment, but her own resilience. Not the frontier's harshness, but her refusal to let it break her. Years later, when people asked about the ranch and how it became legendary across the territory, Clara would tell them the truth. It wasn't one moment, wasn't a single decision or dramatic rescue. It was the accumulation of small choices. Staying when leaving was easier, fighting when surrender made more sense, trusting again despite every reason not to, working until her hands bled and her back screamed because animals were depending on her, standing up to people with more power and money because justice mattered more than comfort. The ranch became known as a place where wounded things healed, where people who'd been thrown away got second chances, where hard work mattered more than background or breeding or the stories people told about you. Ranchers brought their dying livestock from hundreds of miles away because Clara Holloway had a gift nobody could explain, but everyone respected. Young people fleeing bad situations appeared at the gates, and Clara would look at their desperate faces and see herself in that ruined wedding dress. She always found room for one more. The ranch grew, not into an empire, but into something better, a community. The Morrisons rebuilt on neighboring land with money Cade and Clara lent them. Miguel eventually married a widow from town and brought her 3 children to live in a house Cade helped him build. Iris started training horses, became famous for it across 3 territories. Clara and Cade's life together wasn't smooth. They fought sometimes about money and decisions and whether they could afford to take in another stray family. Clara still woke from nightmares occasionally, gasping about Jonathan or jail cells or Eleanor's cold smile. Cade got moody when stressed, withdrew into work instead of talking, but they learned to weather it, to give each other space when needed and closeness when possible, to say sorry when wrong and mean it, to celebrate the good days and survive the bad ones together. Clara never had children. Her body wouldn't cooperate despite years of trying, and that hurt in ways she couldn't fully articulate. But the ranch filled with other people's children, the Morrisons' kids, Miguel's stepchildren, the sons and daughters of hands who came and went. Clara taught them all how to gentle a frightened horse, how to recognize sickness before it showed symptoms, how to survive when the world tried to break them. They called her Aunt Clara, and she loved them fiercely. On Clara's 40th birthday, Cade gave her the deed to the ranch, her name alongside his, legally binding, equal ownership of everything they'd built. "It was always yours anyway," he said, "just making it official." Clara cried, which annoyed her because she hated crying, but some moments deserved tears. That night, sitting on the porch they'd rebuilt together after a storm took the original, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here, all the pain and fear and desperate struggling, all the moments she'd wanted to give up but hadn't. "Do you think about it?" Cade asked, reading her mind the way he'd learned to do over the years. "About how you ended up here?" "Sometimes." Clara leaned against his shoulder. "I used to think Jonathan Hayes ruined my life, that being abandoned at that altar was the worst thing that could happen to me. And now? Now I think he accidentally saved me." Clara's voice was quiet. "If he'd married me, I would have spent my whole life trying to be what he wanted, trying to fit into his world, his plans. I would have been miserable and never known why. He was still a bastard, absolutely. But bastards sometimes do you favors without meaning to." Clara smiled slightly. "He broke me open. And yeah, that hurt worse than anything I'd experienced. But it also meant I had to rebuild from scratch, choose what to keep and what to throw away, decide who I wanted to be instead of who people expected." Cade was quiet for a moment. "You ever regret it, choosing this life?" "It's been hard. It's been brutal," Clara corrected. "But no, I don't regret it. Hard things are usually the things most worth doing." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. In the barn, Ash nickered softly, old now, but still healthy. Claire had promised her that Mare would live out her days in peace, and she'd kept that promise. She'd kept a lot of promises over the years. To herself, to Cade, to the people who depended on the ranch for survival. That's what love was, Claire had learned. Not the butterflies and romance of young infatuation, though she and Cade had that sometimes too, but the daily choosing, the showing up even when tired, the fighting for each other and with each other and alongside each other, the refusing to quit even when quitting would be easier. 20 years after Clara first stumbled into Cade's barn, a young woman appeared at the ranch gate. She was maybe 19, wearing a dress that had once been nice but was now torn and filthy. Her face was bruised. Her eyes held the same desperate emptiness Clara remembered feeling. "Please," the girl whispered, "I need help. I have nowhere else to go." Clara looked at her and saw herself. Saw every person who'd ever been broken and discarded and told they deserved it. "Come inside," Clara said gently. "You're safe here." She led the girl to the house, sat her down, got her food and water, listened to her story, another man, another betrayal, another escape. The details were different, but the shape was the same. When the girl finished talking, she looked at Clara with hollow eyes. "Everyone says I'm ruined. that no decent person will ever want me now, that I should just accept what happened and be grateful for whatever scraps I can get. Clara felt rage burn through her, old and familiar, the same rage she'd felt when Eleanor called her worthless, when the town whispered she deserved abandonment, when men tried to kill her just for existing. "You're not ruined," Clara said firmly. "You're surviving, and survival is the first step toward everything else." "But how do I—" The girl's voice cracked. "How do I stop feeling like this? Like I'm worthless?" Clara thought about that question, about all the easy answers people gave that meant nothing, about the hard truth she'd learned through years of bleeding and fighting and refusing to quit. "You don't stop feeling it," Clara said honestly. "Not right away, maybe not for a long time, but you make different choices. You decide that other people's judgment doesn't define you. You find work that matters, people who see your worth, places where you belong. And slowly, piece by piece, you build a new life. One that's yours. One nobody can take away." "What if I can't? What if I'm not strong enough?" "You're strong enough." Clara gripped the girl's hand. "You know how I know? Because you made it here. You survived whatever happened and found the courage to ask for help. That's not weakness. That's the beginning of strength." The girl started crying, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Clara held her, letting her break apart in a safe place. Sometimes you had to fall completely before you could start climbing back up. Later, after the girl fell asleep in the spare room, Clara walked out to the barn. Kate found her there, standing with Ash the way she always did when she needed to think. "Another one?" he asked. "Another one. You can't save them all, you know." Clara smiled slightly. "I know, but I can save this one, and maybe that's enough." Kate pulled her close. "You've built something good here, something important. I hope you know that." Clara did know. Not in the arrogant way, but in the quiet certainty that came from years of work. The ranch wasn't perfect. They still struggled with money sometimes, with drought and disease and all the things that tried to kill frontier life. But they survived. More than survived. They thrived in their own way. And people knew. Across the territory, when someone was desperate and broken and had nowhere else to turn, they pointed them toward the Holloway Ranch, toward Clara, who'd been broken herself and learned to build something better from the pieces. That was her legacy. Not wealth or fame or comfort, but the simple knowledge that she'd helped people survive when survival seemed impossible. That she'd proven worth wasn't determined by who wanted you or who threw you away, but by what you chose to build and who you chose to be. On her last day, and it would come eventually, though not for many years yet, Clara knew she'd have no regrets. She'd lived fully, loved honestly, fought hard, made mistakes, and learned from them. Built something lasting from nothing but stubbornness and the refusal to let the world's judgment define her. The woman who'd walked into that barn wearing a ruined wedding dress would have been proud. And maybe, Clara thought, as she stood in the lamplight with Cade's arms around her, and a frightened girl sleeping safe in their house, and horses breathing softly in their stalls, maybe that woman would also be surprised, because she'd thought her story was ending that night in the barn. But really, it was just beginning. The frontier had tried to break her. The world had thrown everything it could at her: betrayal, violence, lies, prison, poverty, scorn. And Clara Whitmore Holloway had survived it all. Not by being perfect or invulnerable, but by being stubborn and refusing to quit and learning that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is ask for help. She'd found home in the last place she expected, found love with a man who proved words with actions, found purpose in healing animals and helping people and building something that mattered. And if a girl in a ruined wedding dress could do that, then anyone could. That was the real lesson, the one Clara would spend the rest of her life teaching to every broken person who stumbled through her gates. You're not defined by what breaks you. You're defined by what you build afterward. And sometimes, the thing that nearly destroys you ends up being exactly what you needed to become who you were always meant to be. Clara smiled into the darkness, holding tight to the man she loved and the life she'd earned through blood and sweat and sheer determination. The barn door stood open behind her, the same door she'd stumbled through all those years ago. But she wasn't stumbling anymore. She was home.